Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 228. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge on the comic forums, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim. Marcia, so says the sensei of the whatnot, Segulin, and the Duke of I had no idea you were going to pull that one out. And we're talking on this episode, first of all, we're going to talk about Superman 703, the continuing story of Grounded. We're also going to talk about Batman, The Return of Bruce Wayne, issue number 5. We had intended on going into the Bruce Wayne, The Road Home one-shots, and we have so much footage from the New York Comic Con that we want to continue airing that we're going to edit those into this show as well. So we've got a lot to discuss, including a great interview with friend of the show, Gail Simone. So I'm really excited for all of the material that we have on this episode. And Jim, next week, one of the lead-off features will be Bruce Wayne, The Road Home. We'll talk about some of these one-shots. Our sponsors for this episode are the New York Comic Con. I know the New York Comic Con has passed, but we're already getting ready for next year. It's nycomiccon.com. We had a great time this year, so please be sure to bookmark the page and take a look at what they're doing for next year. Wonderful convention. We had a fantastic time. And over the next couple episodes, you're going to be hearing some great segments and clips where you can see why it was so great to be at the New York Comic Con. That's nycomiccon.com. Our sponsors for this episode are DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, you can pick up the Batman 80-page Giant 2010 number 1. And this is a collection of writers and artists who are doing some wonderful short stories set in Gotham City. This features the Joker, the Riddler, Calendar Man, Scarecrow, and yes, even Humpty Dumpty. It's 7 short stories, all in one giant issue. The joke's on you if you think you'll make it out of this one alive. And it's available in December, and the price is regularly $5.99. 40% off, only $3.59. I'm really digging these 80-page Giants. They're very self-contained. A lot of times there's a theme to each one of them, and they've been really good in the quality end. I don't know how many of you have been reading these or trying them out, but they actually surprise me how interesting they are. So that's the 80-page Giants. Usually get some creators and artists that you don't expect to be on Batman titles or Superman titles or Justice League titles, whoever, whichever particular 80-page one-shot was. In this case, it's Batman. So this one looks really interesting to me. That's DCBService.com, your comic book pre-order source. Over at InStockTrades.com, I'm a big fan of this book, the DC Comics Encyclopedia. It's cool because, I talk about a lot of times how they have hardcovers and trades of comics, but I forget that they have a lot of the encyclopedias and books like that are accessories to comic book reading. And this DC Comics Encyclopedia, this is the updated version. I've got the original version. I've been eyeing this one for some time because it's got 48 brand new pages. They've updated this since last time around, and it's 25% off. It's $40 regularly, only $30 with that discount. And it's a wonderful book. If you haven't had a chance to pick one of these up, go to InStockTrades.com and take a look at all it has in there. It goes character by character, and the amount of detail that's given to each character, the wonderful art that's spread throughout. It's just a wonderful joy. If you're a fan of like your Who's Who and things like that, it's that kind of style of presentation in a hardcover coffee table book, which is, I've got this on my bookshelf in our office here. I often pull it out to look up information about characters. Sometimes I'll page through it just for fun. That's InStockTrades.com. Your source for your collected edition trades, hardcovers, and resource books like this. So check out InStockTrades.com. Remember, orders of $50 or more give you free shipping. Sensei, what kind of a podcast are we?
Well, Sean, we are a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth into plotline, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're reviewing. So if you go over something you haven't read, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
Jim, I just want to say before we kick off this podcast, this is a grouchy-free zone.
Grr, I'm a mean guy.
Let's talk some comics.
Like a human helicopter, the Flash rotates his body, rising faster, faster!
Jim, our first chat this episode, I wanted to talk about Superman number 703. And this is one of those books where it's written by J.M. Straczynski. Eddie Barrows is the penciler. J.P. Mayer on inks. Rod Rice, colorist. John J. Hill, letterer. John Cassaday and friend of the show, David Barron, on the cover. Lee Bermeo is on the variant cover. Will Moss, associate editor. And Matt Idelson is the editor. Superman, as always, is created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. Grounded's been one of those stories where it's really interesting to me right now watching kind of the comic commentary, because I'm seeing a very mixed reaction to Grounded. When we were in New York, we had an equal amount of listeners, I would say, who were very into Grounded, and listeners who just it wasn't really hitting them at all. Both sets of listeners were Superman fans. And I would honestly say, I don't know, Jim, you talked to listeners at different times than I did. It felt to me pretty evenly divided. What have you been noticing?
Well, actually, evenly divided is a good statement. There's a strong, feelings on both sides, and I don't know. For me personally, I'm definitely loving this story. And when I talked to people who were enjoying it, they had the same kind of fire and a passion that I had. So that was kind of cool to see. And then, you'd run into someone who's saying, it's just not hitting it for me. And I'm like, okay, I can't knock, it's your opinion. So, okay, that's cool. But it was just one of those things where I was like, I was kind of getting, caught up and stuck, when I was talking to somebody, because I'm like, I don't want to sit there and say, how can you not be enjoying this? But yeah, I understand. It's just not for everybody.
I'm digging it too, but I am noticing one common thread. I don't know if you're noticing this. I'm noticing that a lot of people who aren't liking Grounded were people who didn't like the previous arc as well. And when I say the previous arc, I'm going all the way back to they didn't really like the whole New Krypton thing leading up to this. I don't know if you noticed that kind of common thread, but I noticed that seems to be, I'm not saying that that's exclusive for everybody, but I've noticed that has been a common statement that's come out of people, and I just can't help but wonder if maybe they hung on for New Krypton, didn't like it, and then they hit into Grounded, and I think they're already in that mode from that. I don't know if that's fair to say. I'm speculating. It's hard for me to speculate on it because I'm liking this story, and I did like what was going on with New Krypton. I loved the exploration of the different Superman-related characters, and I loved seeing Clark in that World of New Krypton series. So for me, they've been hitting very high on the Superman books, but there really is a very strong population of people that are kind of feeling the other direction, which is interesting to me.
Yeah, see, I didn't see that with people, because I even asked people, did you like the stuff going on? And, I would say majority of them, the people I asked, that they enjoyed the New Krypton, they enjoyed all that stuff, and then it just goes to Grounded, and it's just like, if they lost, and it was like kind of like it lost me when they went into Grounded kind of deal.
So that's actually interesting, because if then there's like a mixture on that, I wonder if some people, they were liking the exploration of the larger overarching Superman universe, and now Grounded has taken that away. I think there's a lot more going on out there than meets the eye on it. I was glad to see a number of people though liking Grounded who weren't Superman fans previously. Like I talked to our friend Chris Kendall's a great example of that. I was talking to him the other night. He's reading and enjoying Grounded, and he hasn't been reading Superman previously. So he's somebody who's jumping on board because of the buzz of this storyline and finding it very satisfying. So I'm curious to see how many people maybe hadn't previously read Superman, but just decided to give this JMS run a shot. Because you really don't need to be reading any other book to be following Grounded. It's completely contained. I really liked how this opened up with Superman. I love that the guy's facing straight up and down, so you don't really realize what's happening until you get to the last panel, and Superman's holding this fella upside down for harassing this girl. It's this waitress, Tammy Winter, and I get the idea that this isn't an isolated incident of him doing this. It kind of harkens back to Superman 2. Remember the thug that was in the diner in Superman 2, who it seemed like he was a regular and he constantly was just a bully in there. It seems like that's what this guy is, and Superman's kind of trying to straighten him out. What do you think about Superman taking on this role of hanging with the everyman, looking at smaller things and trying to get in touch with what more can we do or how can we change at that level? Do you prefer him on this level? Do you prefer him with more the larger scale? I'm fighting Metallo, I'm fighting Luthor, I'm fighting... Or do you like the mix? Is there something that you're getting from this?
Well, I'm digging the everyday, grounded, down-to-earth kind of Superman stories that we're getting. And I tell you, this whole opening kind of did throw me for a little bit because Superman was using scare tactics. And that, I'm not going to say I didn't like it, because I did like it, but it caught me off guard. And I think that's what this whole series is doing, It's Superman looking at how he's dealing with stuff, how he's, reacting to the situation, how he's going to handle the situation at hand. And I think that's neat to see his exploration and maybe his change a little bit, because he could have taken this guy, dropped him off at the police station, and nothing would have happened. The guy would have been out immediately. He would have been back to harassing that waitress. This right here just put the fear in him. This guy is never going to bug that waitress again. And this was, and it was something like, this is Superman taking care of the problem, not taking care of a symptom. And I like that, seeing that about him. And I like how he's been handling all the previous stuff where it's just right down to earth tactics, just bam, right then and there. It's not about the big picture. It's not about, stopping invasions or dealing with Lex Luthor or Metallo or whatnot. It's about Superman being right there every day. And I think that for me is the strength of Grounded. And I'm curious to see what kind of Superman, who we're going to have when this is all said and done. Because as he's going through this stuff, this is going to change how Clark looks at the big picture, how Clark deals with the overall, big major events kind of deal.
It's funny, this harkens back to the drug dealers. When he was handling the drug dealers back then, he did something very similar to this in the way that he was approaching it. What can I do to make a change here and now? Is it going to change this guy forever? Maybe not. But is it going to keep him away from this area because Superman's watching? Yeah. So I don't know. It's interesting to see what kind of overarching effect. I do like that his actions and what he's doing, especially in light of New Krypton, in this story are being called into question. And what does he bring to Earth? I'm liking that story isn't just being dropped and ignored. You can't take a huge event like that and how deeply it affected Earth in general and not have some aftershocks. I also wonder, going back to the fact that people are kind of mixed on this, I wonder what would happen if there had been, Action Comics right now had been, which I wouldn't want this done because I love the Luthor story, but what if Action Comics were focusing on, or another Superman book, were focusing on more of the traditional Superman adventures? Except then you'd run into the whole thing.
Continuity.
And yeah, how could he be doing both? So I just wonder, though, if maybe that balance would have maybe pleased some fans in a way where they'd be enjoying Grounded more if they were getting that storytelling along with it. I don't know. It's interesting to me. I'd actually love to hear from Superman fans who are both liking Grounded and telling us why, whether you're new to Superman or not, and fans who aren't and tell us why. What is it that's missing? Because I feel this is very much Superman to me, but that's my opinion. I'm fascinated by this. We had Raphael Sands, and I apologize if I'm butchering your name because I've only seen his name visually, but he and I were having an interesting chat about this today. And I think he said he was going to call into the show, and I hope he does because I'd love to get his opinion on here. It's interesting to me to see this so divided like this, because I do feel that this story brought Superman back to Earth, which was a criticism of New Krypton, that he was gone too long. So I don't know. I'm curious to see what will happen.
Yeah, definitely wondering where this is going to come out of this, because by the end of this issue, we do see once again a resurgence of anti-Superman feelings. They never went away. People kind of okay, Superman's back, New Krypton's gone, but you can't immediately let go of hate. You can't immediately push it aside and say, yay, he's back, everything's back to normal. No, there's still going to be those hesitations. There's still going to be people out there who are anti-Kryptonian who will see Superman just as another Kryptonian. So this is, again, I like how we're seeing him deal with this stuff. But for me, when we're talking just human interaction, the Batman interaction was absolutely outstanding.
Oh yeah, we saw some preview pictures of this. One of friends of the show bought pages from this book. And actually, the page that we're looking at right here was one of the ones that he bought when you take a look at Batman appearing for the first time. I love the concept of Batman having multiple Batmobiles all over the place. That would fit Bruce. It would also fit Dick Grayson, who is now operating the way that Bruce did, because this is Dick's Batmobile, it's not Bruce's. So Dick has carried on that tradition. Maybe even, and this is stuff that actually harkens back to Tomasi's Nightwing, where we saw him taking advantage of using the different towers to get from place to place and having, kind of like a different way of handling a base of operations than Bruce had done previously. This feels very natural following what he was doing with the hang glider in Nightwing, kind of trying to find ways to get from place to place a lot faster. So I love that this just feels organic and nothing felt out of place from it.
Yeah, and I was glad to see that Dick handled this like Batman. This for me was a really cool Batman moment, and because it was Dick Grayson in the cowl, there was slight differences between how the dynamic between the two of them, but it wasn't like a major, major shocking difference. Clark was still very respectful to Dick. He wasn't rude to him, but I think he probably, if it had been Bruce throwing this stuff out there, maybe Clark would have been a little bit different in how he talked back to him.
It's also not just that it's Batman, though. It's also the leader of the Justice League, which was something that I found interesting. Because as his role as Justice League leader now, he has to look at the world in a different way. And he has to, when Superman's on walkabout like this and you're questioning his behavior and his actions, who needs to handle that but the leader of the Justice League? So I liked that little addition to it as well. That was very fitting at the moment. Plus, Bruce isn't here to do it, so right. Dick also feels responsibility. This was arguably the best friend of Batman. So if he's falling apart, Dick's got to really take a role in determining, do I need to take this guy down? And then, where do we go from there? How do I help him? What do we do at this point? So there's a lot of responsibility on Dick Grayson's shoulders in this issue that I was really into. And that was kind of a deeper subtext to the whole thing.
Yeah, and it was cool because in the beginning of Grounded, we had people always kept throwing out Red K. He didn't run into any red kryptonite. Lois said it, Flash said it to him. But Dick looks at it completely different, saying that, hey, you're suffering from an emotional breakdown here. You've had massive trauma, massive tragedy in your personal life. This isn't, normal. This isn't right. You need to step back. You need help kind of deal. I thought that was cool that he's looking at it completely differently. He's not throwing out kryptonite comment. He's throwing out the man behind the, the super. He's talking to Clark Kent. He's talking to Kal-El. They're saying, hey, you got to check yourself, make sure there's something not more than what you think. This isn't just about a walkabout. There's something more here.
I also like that Dick's approaching him as an equal. Which Definitely. Is interesting because when we saw him first, especially in Batman and Robin, we saw him first having chats with Commissioner Gordon. And the way that he was looking at Gordon versus the way that Bruce would look at Gordon in the Batman series, and this has been consistent since he's become Batman, we see him look at him more as a respected adult than an equal on the level that Batman did before. Mm-hmm. This is Dick after all this time being Batman. And I actually applaud DC for giving Dick this really long tenure as Batman before bringing Bruce back, because I think this adds to the sense of he has gone through a lot in his time as Batman exclusively. And I think seeing that longevity of it has added more strength to the character and more strength to him in the role than it would have if they'd just done this for 6 months. I think that was what, in interviews, and I forgive me if I'm wrong on this, I thought they said in interviews it was really only supposed to be about 6 months originally, and they actually extended it, 14 issues, I think?
Yeah.
Much longer than they had originally expected. And I think that adds to the weight of this particular moment because he's been in there that much longer. That's just me.
And I'm glad to see that Dick is getting the respect he deserves. There's definitely a strong support for him. There's a lot of people who want him to go back to being Nightwing, which I fervently disagree with, but we're all entitled to our own opinions. But I was so glad at the different panels that people, when they asked, hey, are you liking Dick Grayson as Nightwing, there was thunderous applause. And I was so glad to see that and hear that.
Did you say Dick Grayson as Nightwing?
Right, there were people who wanted him back as Nightwing.
Oh, was the thunderous applause for him as Nightwing or as Batman?
As Batman.
Oh, okay.
What did I say?
You said him as Nightwing.
Oh, sorry.
I'm like, what are you talking about?
I just contradicted myself.
You did. I'm just like, where are you going with this? So they were applauding for him as Batman.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, there was thunderous applause for that. Well, sorry.
No, it's okay. It was fun. I was listening to him, like, whoa. And unless I misheard you, maybe I've got a brain freeze. But anyway, moving on with that, I'm one of the people that wanted him back as Nightwing. I mean, I've said it on the show many times that at the end of this, I wanted Bruce back as Batman and Dick back as Nightwing because I believe that the Nightwing role is an A-list role. I never thought it was an issue, was Dick Grayson already an A-lister? I'm going to admit right now, I've changed my mind. I think I know they've sold me on him as Batman. This is working. And the longer that it goes on, the more that it's working for me. I think it is, though, since we've gotten announcements of Batman Inc. and just how much larger the whole Batman concept's going to get, it's opening me up to different possibilities on how this might work. I'm very curious, and this is just, obviously it's just me speculating now. I have to see it in practice before I can actually say that.
Yeah.
But we're getting a lot of Dick Grayson. We're getting him in, 3 Batman books? And then the Justice League.
Yes.
So, that's a lot of Dick Grayson, who, I don't know how much more A-list you can get than having that many books. I'm going to be interested to see how that all plays out. Because it seems like he's going to be the Batman for Gotham. It's not going to be Bruce in that role. Bruce's role is different now, which is what a lot of people were clamoring for that were fans of the idea of Dick Grayson staying as Batman. And I guess I didn't see the possibility of Bruce as Batman coming back and staying Batman but in a different capacity, where he's actually doing something bigger as Batman. Is that how you're seeing all this playing out, or do you think I'm kind of out there with this?
No, I'm co-signing what you're saying there. I see, definitely Dick being the Gotham Batman, as well as the Justice League Batman, and Bruce is doing his thing with Batman Inc., kind of spreading the mission out. Yeah,
which is, that to me is kind of an interesting concept, and I didn't expect to be excited by that. And I didn't expect the Batman Inc. concept is really what the truth is. One of the highlights of this discussion between Clark and I almost called him Bruce, because he looks like he's carrying himself like that. But one of the highlights of this discussion between Clark and Dick, for me, was when he was bringing in the point, what if somebody had been dealing with the average man when the tragedies befell you and Bruce? What would have happened? Would there have even been a need for you? And it's an interesting argument that he makes. And I philosophically, it's interesting throughout this. I do admit that I teeter-totter. I see Clark's point, but then there's things that start to happen later on where you can't help but say, Dick's got a powerful argument here as well. And I am going to be curious to see how this plays out, because the two of them display here two very different philosophies. Is Superman causing bigger problems by what he's doing right now? Is his making his presence known, where he's exactly going to be at all times, enabling there to be bigger problems in these areas? Or is Superman right, and that you can actually do change by, getting along with the average man and really trying to help pump them up by his walkabout? I'm going to be very curious to see how this continuing exploration of two different philosophies plays out, because we're not done with Dick Grayson in this. I just don't feel that.
Oh God, no way. Definitely not. I liked how when they're going back and forth, kind of Clark sort of did turn it back on Dick, saying, hey, you're talking about emotional breakdown. You live an emotional breakdown with what you did. You're, constantly fighting against, just what happened to you to prevent it from somebody else. It's, I thought, that was just a cool way to go with it. But it was, again, another thing that had me wondering, just looking at Clark a little bit differently. And I don't even want to say anything negative to Clark, because it's Clark talking to Dick as, an equal, not talking down to him. But, he didn't pull any punches. He didn't hold anything back. He said, hey, if you're going to sit there and analyze me, I'm going to analyze you right back. And for me, that's why that final sentiment that he threw out was such a Batman moment. Where he's like, what? Exactly what you said. Superman is somewhere exactly where everyone knows where he's going to be. The collateral damage will be high if anybody goes after him. And that cool line he had about just isolation we endure is the price we pay for what we do. You can't go home again. Because when we walk into our world, we walk out of theirs forever. I thought that is just a cool Batman statement and sentiment as to why Bruce was always a little bit standoffish. Why, when you're a hero, you stick within your own, group, your own, you only have insiders. You don't let the outside world into what you're doing. And I think, when you're Superman walking amongst the people, walking through, your suburbs and whatnot, you're trying to go back into their world, and it doesn't fit. You can't do that.
I disagree with Dick a little bit there, in the sense that I would go further and I would have said to him, if I was talking to Clark, I would have said, isn't that what your Clark Kent identity is all about? Isn't that your way to connect with the average man? Isn't that your way to connect with the streets? To do change through what you do at the Daily Planet? It's interesting to see that point. And yet I see what Clark's saying. There's only so much I can do at the Daily Planet. What can I do now on foot? Which would be his comeback to what I just said. Yeah. So, there is an interesting debate there. But heroes, by their nature, Why do they have secret identities? It's so they can live in the everyman world without putting people at risk. And so that's something that I wish I'd seen more in this, with them talking about the secret identities and how that does provide that opportunity. Because, and I wonder if that isn't because Dick is becoming so much more of Batman, the Dick Grayson identity isn't as strong as it used to be. Like in Nightwing, we saw him setting up a major life as Dick Grayson. We haven't really seen a Dick Grayson life set up because he's been so busy trying to heavily adopt the role of Batman and taking that all on. I am hoping that with Bruce returning, that we're going to see more Dick Grayson and more Damian trying to become a person in our world too, because we don't really see Damian try to be, an average boy. Are we going to see that? I'd kind of like to see Damian.
Kind of curious to see that.
The first day at school.
Oh my god.
So, I mean, there's some interesting opportunities there. But the secret identity thing was something that it was interesting that it wasn't brought up.
And here's the thing. I think that would be more of a Bruce bringing it up to Clark, not a Dick Grayson bringing it up to Clark. And I think that's, again, is a difference between having Dick in the cowl and not Bruce in the cowl. Because we've seen different conversations where Bruce and Clark have talked about, what's the real cowl you wear? Is it the Batman cowl or is it the Bruce Wayne disguise? And we've seen that kind of conversations go on. And so I think that's why we probably didn't get something like that. Because though Dick and Clark were speaking as equals, it was Batman and Superman speaking as equals, not Dick Grayson and Clark Kent.
Yeah, I agree with that. When we go to the Daily Planet, we get to see this great moment with Perry White and Lois. I liked the use of Daily Planet as the way for us to learn about the debris coming from New Krypton. It was kind of because who would get the news bits first? The Daily Planet. Why is Clark even a part of the Daily Planet? Well, one of the major reasons, other than his secret identity, was that he would get information first being there. It would make him more effective because, he would be in the middle of the news all day long. So I'm glad to see the Daily Planet taking a role in this storyline as having that moment, and Lois being on top of it. And also being the one to let Clark know he needs to backtrack to Danville, Ohio, to see this and to be a part of this moment.
Here's an interesting thing about Danville, Ohio. This is a real city in Ohio, but it's not east of Cleveland, as they said in the comic. It's south of Cleveland, and it's actually kind of closer to Columbus. Now, really not a big deal. I'm not nitpicking or anything, as I see the Cleveland references, of course, being a tie to Siegel and Schuster and all that kind of stuff.
I was glad to see that, too, just a little nod to the character's history. Because I was really afraid. I knew that they were saying that they were going to Cincinnati, Ohio as a part of this issue. And I'm like, well, I'm hoping they at least hit Cleveland somewhat. Because, the history of the character, could you not? So I was glad to see that happen. What do you think about this shard from New Krypton showing up here? Do you think this is an isolated thing, or are we going to see more of these?
I hope we see more of them because I like it. This Crystal K or New K or whatever we're going to call it, is actually a really cool, way to handle it. Especially like the fact that it affects humans, and it's something that happens to us if we come in contact with it. And my burning question, because we've seen it, it gives someone temporary Kryptonian powers. And it's kind of like a mind control type of deal where she's affecting the next guy. But the burning question for me is the initial person, that teacher who initially contacted it, is she being controlled by someone? And if so, by who?
I think it's the crystal, like what we see with red kryptonite. And I think what happened was, if you look at this moment, and this is just me speculating, so if you got a different idea, go ahead and throw it out. But when she's holding that crystal, I don't think it's an accident that she happened to be looking through it at Superman, and that's how it affected her and made him her focus. I think because she saw him at that point, if she had seen somebody, I wonder if something, but if she saw somebody else, I think her focus would have been different in how she was approaching this. Because she saw him right at that moment. You see the vision that she's having, it turns like a blackish color or something like that, what she's seeing, which is, I guess, our way of seeing what's happening to her eyes at that moment. She's seeing Superman through that shard at that point because he just happens to be walking by. And that's what puts that focus on him. So I think it really is because she saw Superman and it was looking through that shard, that the shard has made her focus on him somehow. and her abilities are totally focused at targeting this man. So, and when she touches the man in the bar, we see the man in the bar now, he's going after Superman because of touching her. I think he was totally controlled by what she's experiencing. But yeah, I don't think she's controlled by somebody else. I think this is totally driven by the fact that she happened to see him through that chart.
And that definitely could be the deal. It could be the whole, the focus, concentration, or anything like that. I don't know. That's the thing I like about something new in the universe. Mm-hmm. We don't have all the answers. We're seeing some stuff, and it led to a really cool story arc. I really laughed at how she went from being the respectfully dressed teacher, in her classroom to, I don't want to say tramp it up, but she kind of did a little bit when she went into that bar. So she kind of definitely, that's not how she would dress in the classroom. So I thought that was kind of a cool thing, just seeing her, that transition to her personality, kind of the way to, to pull the guy in, to draw him in, to find the exact right person, probably wouldn't have affected somebody who's a little bit more, stable and or, kind of clean-cut guy as it affected this bar dude, because he's known for picking fights. He's known for being not the nicest person in the world, so he was a natural candidate for it.
We have casual Fridays at my school, but there's no way she would get a talking to if she came to school looking like this. A major talking to. I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer. You'd actually argue if she came to school looking like this, should you be teaching? Because it goes into the, how smart are you? I mean, that's kind of common sense. But I thought that was interesting to see the reversal as well, because I totally agree with you. The change in her attire, while she may dress more casually when she goes out, I do think that we saw a drastic change in the attire to match what was going on with her because of the kryptonite, whatever they're calling it.
Yeah, I don't know. I like Crystal K personally, but that's just me.
Well, and that's perfectly fine. I like that she touches a bully and that we see Clark having a conversation with a police officer, and this guy kind of walks up and just whacks him. I like moments where we get to see Clark unleash.
Yeah.
But I love that he doesn't do it naturally. Like, this guy hit him multiple times in multiple situations before Clark was ready to really unleash on him and really to let loose with his powers. That's something, that restraint, the constant need for restraint, must be very difficult for him. Because it's one of the things I've enjoyed about the show Smallville throughout its constant, development of Superman, has been we've got to see how much he has to hold back versus it's not just learning about your powers, it's learning to hold them back so you don't hurt people, so you don't crush things, so you don't, your emotions can never get the better of you. Because if you let loose with your emotions, you can really cause some serious harm and damage. We see it here when he lets loose. It actually is interesting how he needs to keep himself in check because just even in a small one-on-one fight, look at the amount of damage these two people cause the planet.
Oh, yeah, big time. And it was something that, to play kind of like a devil's advocate thing here, how much did Clark really need to unload on this guy? Did he stop and think about the surroundings? Yeah, afterwards he went and did a quick cleanup, and that was kind of cool. But while they were fighting, wouldn't he have, taken the guy away from the populated area and then continue the fight instead of just fighting through this downtown of this very small town? I enjoyed these panels, don't get me wrong. I thought this was a really cool story, seeing him unload and seeing him fight, but in the back of my mind, I do ask myself, is, everything all right with Clark? Again, going back to what, Dick was saying about, some emotional distress there. Maybe this is, Clark's unleashing, and he's, his aggression it's misplaced aggression.
It's funny. I'm curious to see what it turns out is going on with him here, because he doesn't know. Like, if you genuinely asked him as a friend, what's going on with you, dude? He couldn't answer you right now, because he hasn't been able to when he's been asked. This is just something that he needs to do. So your question's very valid. I don't know that necessarily means that something's wrong with him, as far as he's trying to maybe understand the world better. I don't know. I'm enjoying that part of the journey, is that I feel I don't know, like he doesn't know yet. What I want to comment on something you just said, though. With the damage there, it's one of the things I liked about this issue. Everything you just said is not ignored by the media afterwards. And I don't remember and people can correct me if they're wrong, I don't remember a time where this type of thing was brought up. You see Superman doing, repairing everything. He didn't just leave. He stayed there. He's repairing things, doing the best he can to put everything right, and in many cases, improving things. Because it says, yeah, my house was pretty much wrecked. It's going back better than before, I guess. But here's the interesting part. But we lost our wedding photos. The china my wife inherited from her mom. It meant the world to her, and now it's just gone. So this is interesting. Yes, Clark can go back and correct it. He can even make certain things that were destroyed better. But he can't fix everything there. And is this something that he's going to have to deal with and learn to change the way he operates because of it? Or is this going to just more further validate what Dick Grayson's saying? I don't know, but that pivotal with that first guy there, I was like sitting here, whoa, that's an interesting point. Because yes, he is building it back. Like if somebody destroyed my house right now and built it back better than before, that'd be great. But there are things in my house that are collectibles. There are things in there, and I'm not just talking about like comic-related collectibles or things like that I could find on eBay. There are things that I've had since my childhood that are special to me, that were given to me by I have a Batman alarm clock, for example. Seems like a goofy little thing to, because it's a Batman alarm clock. My mom gave this to me when I was a little kid. And it's a vivid memory to me of how she got it from Avon, of all the goofy things. But I mean, to tell you how vividly I remember this, it's got like a disc in it that plays this, time to get up and out of bed thing, and it still works. But regardless of the fact that it's a Batman alarm clock or something like that, it's something that I have from my childhood that my mother gave me that I've had for my entire life. I don't use it anymore. I'll play it every, couple years or something like that just to see if the disc is still working and for nostalgia purposes. But I will never be rid of that because it's a favorite memory of mine. Mm-hmm. And it just shows what she used to do. She knew my love for superheroes and has always kind of embraced that. And it's just something that it's a connection point for me and her. If that was destroyed, I would be really upset. Could I move on? Sure, this guy's going to move on as well. But, if Superman hadn't come into my town and destroyed my house, I'd be pretty ticked off, I mean, so I could see some resentment for Superman in this. And also being mixed because the guy put my house back better than before. And how do you not go, well, Superman, he put my house back together. It's just a great story. So there would be some elements of I don't think this guy's totally bashing Superman. I think he's torn. And I love that he felt torn. It was very conflicted, his interview. And that was honest and real to me, which was something that I thought was a strength of those interview segments. And it harkens back to what you said before. What is he up to? And what is driving him right now? And was it necessary to go as far as he did? I don't know. Or could he have done that elsewhere?
Yeah, see, I don't know. It's one of those things where, because that guy was so obsessed with the fight right then and there, because we initially see in the beginning, Clark goes to take him up, and the guy elbows him, and then is flying on his own. And that just so Clark was moving it away from people, but once that fight gets going, you look at some of those panels, and you really see Clark pumped up, especially that heat vision scene where he's blasting the dude. He's got that kind of look on his face as he's unloading on him. So, it's one of those things where I'm just starting to look at it go, especially with the ending panel when we see, Dick just, watching from the watchtower. What that lady's saying about Clark, how he's his two of his worlds have already been destroyed. He abandoned his third one. Is it going to be, basically, are we going to be the hat trick? Is this world going to get destroyed because of Superman? And I'm thinking Dick is looking at the negative comments and the negative sentiment against Clark, and he's not thinking probably along with them, but he's probably thinking, how is this going to affect Clark? Is this going to make things worse? If Clark is in an emotional state right now, will people turning on him push him even farther over the edge? Is that going to create even more problems down the line? Because Dick's got to be thinking this, and Batman thought it as well, that one day Clark could do, an irredeemable, where he could just do a complete full-on heel turn, and now you're dealing with an evil Superman kind of deal.
Well, and here's the other thing to look at, too, though. On Superman's side, I'm going to play devil's advocate for him as well. You know what else Dick isn't seeing, watching from the Watchtower? He isn't seeing the good that Clark has done along the way. We've seen him do things like, walking by and seeing a guy on a porch who's about to have a heart attack or something. These little tiny things that he's done along the way has affected so many people. We've seen him save a lot of lives or affect and touch and enable a lot of people to affect change in their neighborhood, affect change for themselves, change that will go beyond just the initial meeting with Superman, that could set them on a different path for life. So that's something where that is, is that going to come up again? Or are we going to start to see just how much impact he's had during this time? I have to question, when we talked earlier about, and it was funny, it just came to me now, one of the things that people might be having an issue with is we went from Clark in this previous storyline where he was trying to find his place with New Krypton. We haven't seen him come back to being quote-unquote Superman like we're used to seeing. And I wonder if, maybe fans of Superman, that's what they're looking for. And I am a fan of Superman, so I always say on the show that I'm a Batman guy. I've been reading Superman since the 70s too. So I want to, I am there with Superman. I'm a Superman fan. You're dun moments when you're doing that. Yeah. I get it. But I can't help but wonder if this might be why people are divided. Some people are getting very into this story and seeing this exploration with Superman, where other people are like, but I want to see him be Superman. I want to see him take this, you talk about the reluctant leader, but I want to see him take that leadership role again that we have seen from him so much in the past. And I wonder if that's the point of distinction. I'm just speculating. It's funny, I'm trying to get into the head of other people, and it's hard to do that when you're digging something a certain way, and they're obviously coming at it from a different perspective, and they're seeing something different. Both equally valid, but I wanted to talk about this issue because it's a controversial book. This is way back with All-Star Batman and Robin. Why did I want to talk about that? Because it's a controversial book. This is an interesting one to talk about that's controversial. I like this book, but It definitely has a very mixed audience, and I think it's interesting to discuss it and to see where people are coming from. I think you're right, though. You hit the nail on the head early on. There's probably a variety of reasons why people are in different places on this. I would love, actually, I mentioned earlier in the beginning of the show, people who love it, people who are kind of in the other direction with it. I would also love to hear from maybe people who are in the middle, because I haven't heard a lot of that. I haven't heard from people who are kind of in the middle ground saying, well, it's all right, I'm not hating it, I'm not loving it, I'm kind of here. I'd love to hear why you're there, because that's fascinating to me too. Are there people in the middle? Or am I right, it's like two vastly different crowds on this? I don't know, I'd be curious to see where this falls. It's an interesting book, though.
Well, Malcolm's in the middle.
Wow. Right. On that note, let's end the discussion right there. Superman grounded.
So, who's got a camera? Ooh, get one of me and the kid first. Then you and me, then the three of us, and then one with the crowbar. Then...
We are here with friend of the show, Gail Simone, and welcome back to Raging Bullets.
Hey, thank you. Hi, Raging Bullets listeners out there.
I reread last night Birds of Prey, the most recent issue. I reread Secret Six, and I went through and reread Welcome to Tranquility. And I love this line from Birds. I don't remember giving her permission to quit. Let's go get that dizzy blonde. What drives them to say to themselves, I can take more after all that they've been through in the previous arc? What is it about the Birds that keeps them going? Because that's one of the things that I love about the book.
I think they're very fierce women who, if you look at it, they're all women who have had to really muddle through a lot of adversity, have had some terrible things happen to them in the past, and have changed their life or decided to take those experiences and still do something great in the world, still find their place in the world, and not give up and not become a victim. And they can see that in others as well. And plus, they're great friends, even if people make mistakes.
One of the things I'm wondering with the Birds, because it is the brightest day within that whole family. Now, with Hawk and Dove, did they give you like an end game, say put them at this point in time, or is it like we need this to happen to them? How did that go through with you communicating with the brightest day people?
Well, if we go back to kind of when it all started, it was Jeff Johns asked me if I would be interested in writing Birds of Prey again, and at that point I didn't think I would be, because it sort of felt like going backwards to me, and I just wasn't sure. It seems like, not that many writers go back to something that they've done for almost 4 years previously. And so I was really concerned about that. Jeff basically said at one point, well, we're doing Brightest Day, and we really want Birds of Prey to be a book in the DCU. We think it belongs there, and so this is a way to bring it back, but we don't want to do it unless you're going to write it.
Nope.
And so I do have to agree with him that DC does need a book like Birds of Prey, and so I was like, okay, yeah. We knew Hawk and Dove was coming out of Birds of Prey, and from the beginning, before I ever started writing the new arc, I knew that, and I was excited about it, and so, we kind of keep in touch back and forth with what's going on in Brightest Day.
I love that when you wrote it in the story, that you wrote it from it was kind of like we were riding along with the birds in that sequence, because we see the birds gradually get to understand what Hawk and Dove bring to the team.
Right.
And I really liked riding along, because at this point the birds are my attachment point because I've been with them. So we're all asking the question, like, how do Hawk and Dove fit in? And I loved seeing, like, Huntress had some great lines where she's saying, okay, I can kind of see what, especially when Dove was having those action sequences when Hawk was hurt, that I thought were really wonderful because of that.
Well, thank you. And I think that was kind of my goal in a way, because of course people were asking me, well, Hawk and Dove, especially Hawk, how can Hawk be in Birds of Prey? But if you've been reading Birds of Prey since I started with issue 56, there's occasionally been males going in and out. It's not a strictly female book, and I wouldn't want people to label it as that necessarily, even though it is predominantly strong female characters. So I'm actually very excited to kind of mix it up a bit.
Yeah, and Savant and Creote, I actually considered them for the longest stretch members of the team. They had become part of the squad.
Yeah,
and I like that squad mentality.
Yeah, I agree.
I want to jump to the sixth real quick. What did you do to my Bane? Issue 26.
Bane is suffering a little blood loss at the very least at this point.
It's funny, I'm thinking about the team that you put together, and I've got a little theory for you, okay? Now, Dwarf Star, I can't remember him removing his mask. Is there any chance that he could be Ryan Choi in disguise? Now, work with me here. I see this being an evil plot. Ryan knew that he was somehow going to be killed, and he put Dwarf Star in his place, and he's actually underneath that costume.
If only.
I miss Ryan Choi. I love seeing Dwarf Star again. How did you decide on the members of the second six that we're seeing? The Bane's team. How did you decide? Obviously, Giganta and Dwarf Star from the Atom, but...
Right. Well, whenever I do write comics that involve teams, it's always about the team dynamic and what we want to do and how they're going to compare with the other team that they're going against and all of that. And so, and what's going to be fun to write. And I liked writing them, and I thought it would make a compelling story and not have too many characters with all the same motivations and the same personalities.
The thing I want to know with the six is, are we going to see a very horrific, painful demise for Dwarf Star? Because I am so hoping for that. I so want some vengeance for Ryan.
Yeah, that would be great. But of course I can't give that away. But the current arc with Secret Six, I will say some people are not coming back from Skartaris.
Skartaris, what made you use that in the story? I loved having that as a setting. I'm like, well, wait a minute, we're in Warlord's world? How cool is that?
One thing that I just really love about writing Secret Six and feel really blessed is to try to keep that unpredictability. So I think what's more unpredictable than taking him to Skartaris, and Mike Grell gave his blessing, which was very exciting to me, and something that we haven't seen played with for a while, so it's really fun.
See, I love seeing the six in other genres and other areas and things that just mix up. That Western episode was absolutely wonderful. I really just dig it. Are we going to maybe see some other areas, some other issues? Or...
Possibly. People are kindly suggesting lots of things, and one that was suggested was a Pirate Six. And I thought that would be cool. But I don't know. I'm not really saying why we did it, what it was. People are asking me, was it a dream? Are you ever going to explain it? And my answer is, I don't know, and I'm not telling if I do know.
Okay. For myself, and this is just my speculation, I took it as it was the 24th issue, anniversary issue, which felt like a great spot for something like that. I loved it. It was a great issue. When I was reading it in the beginning, my first thing was like, what the? But then all the way through, I'm like, I think the six is one of those books where there's so much that just feels right because it's wrong.
Well, exactly, and it's really fun. And for those of you who were lucky enough to be at the New York Comic Con and see Nicola's print that she did, where she actually set them in Oz, and it's fun to see how perfectly Catman fits into the role of the Cowardly Lion, and Scandal Dorothy, Ragdoll Scarecrow, and Deadshot the Tin Man. So it's really fun to take these characters and really play with them like that. It works great because they are unpredictable.
In the background of the print, they're blowing up the Emerald City. And I was like, okay, that's what would the Six do if they were in there? Whether they set out to do that in the beginning or not, somehow it would happen.
We just know that is what happened.
I got a question for you about Thug. I really loved your short story, Thug. And I think what hit me was the honesty of what the character went through on the schoolyard and the playground. Where did you draw from for that character? Because for me, I'm like, I remember experiences when I was a kid on the playground. And as a teacher, I've seen students who have gone through experiences like that. Where did you get that from?
Well, I think all of us, or most of us at least that I know, and especially in this industry, were probably bullied or made fun of at one point in our life. So each of us have experienced it in our own way. And then, I see it with new family members, nieces, nephews, etc. But I think that one of the things about the story is to show that a monster can be made, and sometimes this can make a monster. That's kind of the inspiration for that, and I've done that with other characters that turn out to be villainous, is something in their past just kind of flip that switch, whereas if the same thing would have happened maybe to a different person, the flip would have switched the other way. Like, I grew up to write comics and write villains and beat up villains, and the things I write, I don't go out and beat up and kill people just because I was picked on. Just an interesting psychology that I found fascinating for that.
I loved it because as a teacher, I feel that that's part of my role is when I see stuff like that, to really try and help that child through that and have those moments. And it was something where I connected with it from my own childhood memories, but then connecting through it today, it was interesting to me to connect through it as an adult from a different perspective.
Well, it is, and as a parent and whatever you are, I think you can see that from that angle, because we all know if we weren't bullied ourselves, we know people who were.
And this story that we're talking about is in the Masked Anthology, which is available from our sponsor, dcbservice.com, but also I got it from Amazon.com on my Kindle app, which is really great. So it's very accessible and very easy to get, and there's wonderful stories throughout it. So.
There totally is. There are some amazing stories, and it's very cool to see how well these characters and the superhero genre can translate into prose.
And I recommend reading it in off-white.
Just the one thing about with Thug that I really just appreciated and loved about it was you did it in the broken kind of English, but we never lost your ability to tell the full story, to paint that great picture. That, for me, was just something that made that story just really amazing and really just fun to read, that I didn't lose your wonderful style by going with the broken English. So that's just a compliment.
Well, thank you very much, because I get lots of questions from people who want to become writers, and they ask questions about dialogue and stuff. And writing stories and dialogue and characters, it's kind of more than just their separate components. They all really need to work together. And I really tried hard with Thug to not, his broken English and his style of writing is not a gimmick for that story. It's part of the story and part of the reader's experience to try to either, sympathize or empathize or see from his point of view, or even if you're not seeing through his eyes, see him through yours, and what that's like to have the life he had and why he talks like that or writes like that. And I think that it just is a layer that adds to the richness of what we're trying to tell.
I'd like to wrap up by talking real quickly about Welcome to Tranquility, One Foot in the Grave. I am loving this miniseries. We're halfway through right now.
Exactly.
And it's one of those where my first thought was, can we get a Zeke Ragdoll crossover? Because those two, I think, I could actually read a whole miniseries of just the two of them together. But it surprises me. The first 12 issues reading it, I saw Mayor Fury one way. Then this series kicks off, and I'm seeing him from a completely different perspective, and I'm feeling very sympathetic towards him. I'm really enjoying the ride, and it's making me question now with what we're seeing from his son. everything that I saw before. I'm feeling like, wait a minute, now there's all new possibilities of what's been going on in this series, and I love the mystery that you built in this. Was this story that you have right now, was it something that you consciously knew about when you had crafted the first 12 issues?
Yeah, it's something, and I always have stuff in the back of my mind, and it's kind of a trick to figure out when to reveal it, and when. I always say to be a writer, you have to be a liar, a cheater, manipulator, all those things that you don't really want to be in real life, but you really are reaching in and grabbing people's emotions and scrambling them up and trying to create some kind of reaction for the reader. And if you don't do that carefully, then the right emotions aren't there when you're ready to get the big payoff.
One of the things I always look about with police, and the way the police are written, sheriffs written, and everyone, just that kind of law enforcement angle. And I gotta just say how much I'm loving how Tommy looks and how she acts in this. This is a normal, mortal, regular, everyday person in this superhero town, but she is the law. And she is laying down the law, and I love seeing that, especially some of those moments where she knew when to let up a little bit, and when the mayor just was just so distraught, and you're like, no, this is okay. This kind of gives him the hug and gives him the support that he needs, even though a couple minutes before she's looking at him as this this criminal. So I just got to say that was just a cool mindset into the law enforcement mindset.
Well, thank you. And Thomasina is actually one of my favorite characters that I've created. I was in love with her as I was creating her, but the more I write her and the more I get to reveal it for her, the more she's just one of my favorite characters that I've created.
I want to recommend that our listeners check out Welcome to Tranquility. It's a superhero retirement community with all the charm and brightness you'd expect from that, but throw in a bunch of really dynamic characters, twisted twists, keep you constantly wondering what's real and what's not. And I love that about the book. It's you think on the surface when you start looking at the bright covers one thing, and then it takes you on this whole ride that is really fantastic. Can we hope for more after this miniseries?
I'm kind of taking a break right now because I'm working on a big project with Ethan Van Sciver right now, so I need a little breathing room. But hopefully in the future we'll get back to tranquility.
I hope so, because I really love the universe. It's been fantastic. But hey, I'll take anything I can get new project-wise, so that's great news.
Well, thank you.
There it is, going into that tunnel.
Jim, our next chat's going to be about the return of Bruce Wayne. Batman, the return of Bruce Wayne, I should say. This is issue number 5, called Masquerade. Grant Morrison's the writer, Ryan Sook on pencils, Mick Gray inks, Perry Perez on art, on pages 22 to 31. Jose Villarrubia as colorist, Jared K. Fletcher letters, Travis Lanham letters, page 22 to 31. So they had like 2 creative teams going here. I wonder if that's to keep this book on time that they're doing that. I don't know. Janelle Siegel, assistant editor, Mike Martz, editor. And Batman created, of course, by Bob Kane. And, wow. This issue for me, Jim, I don't know why I didn't assume it was going to head into a lot of this, but its connections to a lot of the mysteries that have been laid out with the whole Black Glove, then R.I.P., it all coming to a head where we're seeing a prelude to all that. And actually some validation and answers to the mysteries about the Waynes. Thomas and Martha Wayne. Mm-hmm. We're finding out the truth here within these pages, which I did not expect. I thought that was super cool. This issue is easily my favorite so far out of The Return of Bruce Wayne because of that. I think we're finally seeing a lot of puzzle pieces drop together. What were your thoughts?
Oh, dude, I'm echoing. As you're talking, I'm nodding my head. And the thing that surprised me is how this was my favorite one, considering all the cool stuff that was going on before. You got Batman as a pirate, Batman in cowboy times. You got Batman, and you got the cave Batman kind of stuff. And you have them in all these different, time periods and whatnot. And when they were first talking about it, everyone's saying, oh, yeah, that's going to be so cool to see that. And then here we get where he's not in any really past time. He's back in the time right after his parents had died, so it's quasi-modern day. It's still a little bit in the past, but nothing, dramatic. And this was just this great story that was being told. It didn't have anything, I was going to say it didn't have anything really funky happen, but it did have some cool stuff, funky stuff happening. So I got to watch how I word it, but it didn't have that, theater type of deal where we're throwing Bruce Wayne completely out of the mix in some strange land. So I thought that was just the fact that it was, a modern day Gotham, a current day Gotham kind of deal where he's in that time and everything's going fine and everything is still this great story. So I was like, damn, this is neat.
Did the art change? Did you even notice it? Because I'm gonna be 100% honest with you. I do the exact change where the art, at least I think where it occurs. I didn't do the page counting, but I think that page where we get the full page spread of Bruce dressed in that Batman costume, right at the graveyard, is where the art changes. I think, as I'm looking through it, I didn't notice it the first time through. It was the second time through that I'm like, where did this happen at? I never did a page count, so I've got to admit excuse me if I'm being ignorant here and I'm wrong on the page that it is, but I'm just going to go under where my assumption was that it actually happened, and that's where I'm seeing it. At least visually, it looks a little different to me. But I've got to compliment them on picking an art team, at least in my head. The art team did a really great job of keeping the same flow and feel to the artistic style that was laid out by the art team in the beginning, which is hard to do.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I did not even see that I didn't even realize it until I actually went through and just read the creative team. So this was something that flowed through. And again, I don't know how much of that is editorial team, how much it's the art team, whether, it's, communication between them, editorial choices or whatnot behind this. But whoever was responsible for that flow through, that's wonderful. Hoorah.
This issue is really pivotal to me in the way that it opens up, where we get to see Red Robin kind of laying out the fact, I've known this guy forever. I'm his longest running partner, and he is going to make it back here. I mean, there is no question mark here. We need to prepare for it, and what can we do? We haven't heard from the time-traveling team, so we've got to assume the worst. He's going to make it here, and we've got to have battle stations in the ready. And I love that we see the members of the Justice League here. We also see, though, people like the Flash called in. We see Green Arrow called in, Black Canary called in. These are characters, Dr. Light. These are characters who just really need to be involved. It's kind of a all call. I'm assuming we're going to see Wonder Woman's here. We're going to see more characters, I think, brought into this as battle stations need to be called, depending on what happens here. Because this is a worldwide huge problem. He's bringing Omega Energy with him. I was glad to finally, because unless I'm wrong, Jim, have we heard this before, this point, that he's bringing Omega Energy with him, and that he's building up something that is going to blow this hole in time?
No, see, this is the first mentioning of it, so I was glad to see why, to hear why Batman's a threat. Why is Bruce coming back through time? What does he bring with him? There was always that great big mystery of what it could be, and now we're getting an explanation of it that we have this Omega Energy. And if Bruce doesn't know he's bringing it through time, if he doesn't know that he is making himself essentially a time bomb, will he be able to fight it? Will he be able in control when he hits the ground? So I thought that was cool to see what is the big threat here. What is the danger behind Bruce making it back? Because you'd think, hey, Return of Bruce, that'd be great. No, it's not. Here's why. And so definitely cool points. And I love seeing just, Tim in a command position, with what he was doing. And it was cool to see that the other heroes, and we've seen this throughout this entire series, deferring to him because of his time with Batman. You need somebody who understands Bruce, how he thinks, how he handles. This is somebody who truly understands, who's not only trained by him, but, in a way is very similar in personality-wise, combat-wise, just ideology-wise. He and Bruce are very similar, more than him and Dick Grayson, and more than him and anybody. Tim is the great go-to guy for this, and I love seeing the fact that everybody recognized that, and they gave him this position.
It's when we see him in the hospital bed, and from the bullet at the end of last issue, taking a look at the nurse. Do you think that she was in on this? Because when the woman's coming into the room and saying, "Wow, he's perfect, good Lord," and she said, "What did I say?" I get this feeling like the nurse is in at least on some level with the Black Glove, or with Dr. Hurt and his crew, or however this is all playing out. I'm assuming the Black Glove is in place at this point, right?
Oh yeah,
we do know this woman's involved in the Black Glove.
Oh yeah, definitely. She's one of the pieces, one of the keys to it. She's part of this whole deal, right along with Marcia.
Now, here's my other interesting question at this point. Do you think, I know that the nurse read the journal, do you think they have any idea, I'm not saying they wouldn't obviously know our Bruce Wayne today, but do they have any idea what his deal is, as far as that he's actually been traveling through time? Or does she really think that it's just jumbled nonsense, like she kind of implies when she gives him back the book as a keepsake? Because she wouldn't have recognized the handwriting like Bruce did.
Right.
So what do you think that's she read the journal and it didn't mean anything? Or do you think there's any possibility that there is a deeper meaning to it?
What I think is she read the journal. It didn't really have any deep meaning to her now, but the Dr. Hurt story that we got, the RIP story that we got, the fact that knowledge was made, and I'm assuming she probably shared the knowledge with everybody, that knowledge, that what she read probably is what gave him a lot of his insight into Batman, into Bruce Wayne, into everything.
Well, that knowledge would only be useful if she felt that it was necessary to pass it on. And I guess that's where my question mark is. I see one of two possibilities here. Either she did in fact pass it on because she thought it was worth passing on, or she really thinks it's a pile of fluff, like the way that she hands it to him and implies when she gives it back to him. Because I do think if she genuinely thought the book held secrets, why would she give it back to him?
At the time, I don't think she did think it. I think, at the time, I took her for face value. But later on, when they're all talking about, hey, what happened to that guy? She could then say, hey, in that book of his, he had this weird story about time travel, and then she would say what she remembered from the story.
Now, seeing this whole story put together, how would you feel if your memory's lost and you're reading this journal with these crazy stories throughout time and you realize the handwriting's yours? Like, I gotta give him credit, dude's pretty calm considering everything that's happening around him. I wonder if that, though, is the fact that he laid out these clues in this book specifically to try and alert himself. At least that's the impression I'm getting from the book. I think this journal is a key puzzle piece as to how Bruce is going to defeat this. Mm-hmm. I think at every time era, he is gaining more information than we realize. He knows more, I think, at the end of this issue than I think we realize he knows. Like, I don't think the click at the end, I know I'm jumping ahead a second or two, or quite a bit, but at the end of the issue when he seems to click as far as how he's getting out of his predicament, I thought it was more than him clicking how to get out of his predicament. I think that was him putting a bunch of puzzle pieces together that he finally connected from the journal. And I think that we're going to see next issue a big reveal that Bruce has done more than any of the heroes around him could have realized.
He's figured out how to disperse the Omega energy, I'm thinking. And it's going to take a couple more, the next issue we're going to see that final, and I'm agreeing with you on that final moment, that there was something more clicking to who he was. And, getting more to, I think as time's going on, he's getting more of the old Bruce Wayne. He's getting more of his, memories and whatnot. I kind of compare it to the movie 50 First Dates. Did you ever see that with Adam Sandler, and all that, and Drew Barrymore? And I thought, you think about her where she only has her memory for basically one day. It keeps, the memory just keeps resetting. And, she starts leaving a journal for herself and a videotape for herself and stuff like this just to remind her and tell her what's up to speed. And when she finally decides to, initially pull him out of life, she removes him from the journal, but her subconscious mind still remembers Adam Sandler being in her life. I see the same stuff going on with Bruce. His subconscious mind, the mind that is the Batman inside him, is still holding on to this information. And the closer he gets to the 0 hour and to that one point in time, the better off he's going to be, the more he's going to remember. And it's whether he remembers everything and is able to do what he needs to do in time. And as this story has gone on and as this is building, there's bits and pieces that are coming back to him, especially being in Wayne Manor. The Wayne Manor that he grew up in, the Wayne Manor that he lives in, recently. So I thought all this was just, a great way to just play into and, lead to this final episode.
One of the things that we've discussed Bruce possibly solving this himself. The other option is that the heroes could help him solve it. Do you see that happening? I guess to me, I'm so stuck on that I want to see Batman beat him himself. I love when Bruce just shows them, like, guess what, guys? I already got this in the bag.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of that kind of Batman storytelling. That's what I like about Bruce. And it is something that you get that would be different than Dick Grayson the Adventurer, which I like the Adventurer Batman and that aspect that we're seeing more and more with Dick Grayson, that there is something uniquely different. And we'll have to talk about I want to at least make sure that we start to talk about at least the first one-shot with The Road Home, and we can always talk more next episode. But that's one of the things that I'm really digging in seeing that one-shot is the different operation between the two of them. And it shows that there's a validity in having both guys and that they're very different types of Batman. It's not the cowl and the costume, it's what you make of it. But Bruce, I'm convinced that he's going to beat this. And I've got a lot of faith in that. I almost think I'd be disappointed if he isn't the one that does it. You know what I mean?
Oh God, yeah. And it's funny, I'm in agreement with you. I see Bruce beating it. And the way I see this playing out, I see Tim Drake, Bruce figures it out, and Bruce has a way to fix the problem, but the other heroes don't realize it. And I think it's Tim Drake who's going to recognize that look in Bruce's eye and know, okay, Bruce has this figured out. I have to get him away from everybody so Bruce can solve the problem. And I see Tim, getting whatever it is that comes through, that final version of Bruce, get him out of that area so he can do his thing. And I don't know. I see something going on where it's only Tim who knows that he is actually back, that he is, safe and clean and everything is good to go.
Now, one of the things leading to you commented about his subconscious and how these clues are bringing back his subconscious, because we saw him reading the journal, and dude knows how to fight and throw down, which is something that if your memory's gone, that subconscious memory is not, I guess, would be there to a certain extent. This is so much different, though, than somebody who suffered amnesia. In his case, are you reading that he's a blank slate, or that every time he's jumped, there's already elements of himself there, and this journal is serving as a way to just reawaken more? How are you reading that?
See, I'm reading it that he's kind of a blank slate, but as he starts reading through, he starts realizing and remembering stuff, and it starts, okay, this makes sense. There is that, just that, as we talk about, that subconscious thing that when he reads this, he's triggering this stuff. And with the fighting, that's pure muscle memory. It's any professional athlete will talk about the fact that they still have to practice. They still have to go through the motions because, you need to keep your muscles, in tune with what your mind is thinking. You can think, okay, punch this guy in the face, but it's your body has to be used to how you rotate your shoulders. You turn into it. You put your hip into it. You put your power behind it, kind of deal, or this kind of strike. And it's the muscles just, it needs that constant training and just upkeep to keep going at the same level. Right here, this is all just pure, instinct, muscle memory, just that subconscious thing kicking into gear. It's the fight or flight response, and his happens to be fight, not flight, so he deals, with a massive throwdown. It was really cool to see that.
Well, here's my question for you, though. And I don't know if there is an answer to this one. Maybe I'm overthinking it. When has he had a chance to practice or train? He's been traveling from one life to the other. So I guess where's the muscle memory coming from?
Well, he hasn't really lost it yet. I see it. He's only in a time at a certain time, so it's really, to his body, it's only been a couple days.
So you think what's happening with him is happening to him in a much shorter time frame than that it would seem? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, than what it's happening in the real world. To his body, he's going boom, 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 kind of deal like that is how I see it.
Well, except when we saw him take over that Mordecai role, he was clearly taking that role over for, that was more than a day. Did you read that as just a day? Because he took on a whole.
No, he was there for a while. Yeah.
So I guess that's what one of the things that I think is, and this might be the fact of how much Batman I've read that's really giving me a brain freeze on this. I think back to things like when his legs were broken, or his back was broken, I should say, in Nightfall. And he had to come back at Night's End. Chandra Kinsolving healed him there. So he was able to walk again. But he didn't have the muscle memory that you're mentioning. He had to go, that's how Lady Shiva got brought into that whole storyline. He had to go through that gauntlet to give himself back exactly what you're talking about. So I guess, is it just because we've seen him fighting throughout these eras that it stayed with him because of it?
Yeah, probably.
Okay. I'm not like I'm not actually critiquing it at all in a bad way. It was something that I thought about through this, though. I'm like, he's able to throw down. I get that. Where's it coming from? And I don't know, because we do see him fight in every single era. So we do see him take on, the Batman-like role. So is it because he never really stepped away like he did in Nightfall? Is that how you're reading it?
Yeah.
I'm genuinely asking.
Yeah, and again, same thing about time-wise and stuff. That Nightfall thing, that was a very long time for him to be sitting on the sidelines.
Sure.
And as time goes on, you lose that. That's why I really took this as a shorter time period, than what that was.
See, I did take it that he stayed at least a decent amount of time in each era because we see him adopt full roles where he gets very comfortable in those roles. But yet we do see him, when he's taking on those roles, he's definitely taking on characteristics of Batman. So I guess maybe that's how the muscle memory's staying, because he never really... whereas in Nightfall, he's actually immobilized.
Yeah.
He actually has a serious period of time where he's not being quote-unquote Batman. Or at least one thing that's consistent in each of the previous issues, I think we can all agree he was the Batman of that respective era in his own way. Because Mordecai was clearly, in his own way, being the detective that we're so used to seeing Bruce be. And so I don't know, maybe I'm kind of answering my own question here. It was something that I just questioned, and it's not a criticism of the story, it's actually something that I really like, that this particular tale has made me wonder what is really going on with him, because I don't feel like I have a handle yet how much he actually knows. Do you? Do you think you have a handle on how much Bruce knows right now?
Not completely. I think by the end of this issue, I don't want to say full recall, but he's got a good piece on what's going on and how to get out of there, as well as how to get back to his real time. So I think by the end of this issue, we got a pretty good, solid Bruce Wayne coming through the pipeline, but not, full recall. He doesn't know everything. He doesn't have everything. There's still just that one final hurdle he's got to go over.
What's interesting is with this, they're actually bringing him into their conspiracy.
Yeah.
With Martha Wayne and Thomas Wayne, and adding to it. With him going to, as a detective, to confront and talk to Martha's mother. They're actually giving him the information so that when they kill him, he could be killed because he got too close to Thomas Wayne's secret.
Right.
So they're really just adding to this whole little dynamic and using Bruce as the detective to be the one to kind of be the scapegoat and to be like the final, I guess, nail in the coffin of this smear campaign against the Waynes, which is interesting. Now, I'm guessing the Thomas Wayne that went to speak to the mother is, in fact, the Thomas Wayne that we've seen throughout history, right? It's not Bruce's dad. She actually was met by somebody. Is that are you taking that to be Dr. Hurt?
I don't know. Because, at first I was a little bit on the confused side as to, with when it came to the grandmother stuff, I was a little bit on the confused side, and I'm still not 100% certain who this lady has talked to, if at all. Because how much of her is actually mentally there? How much of her is actually there? Is she clueless on a lot of stuff, or is she heartless on a lot of stuff? You see with that Roddy guy who's getting stung by wasps and begging for help, and she just carries on, "Oh, be quiet. That's just how he talks now." No, he's being stung. He's saying, "Hurt, help."
Well, that's Martha's dad, Roddy.
Yeah.
So we're seeing, just, I guess what I took it as, because they were in such a state, especially Mom and what she's dealing with, it enabled her susceptible to being met by a quote-unquote Thomas Wayne doppelganger. But I'm thinking it's the Thomas Wayne that we saw way back in history. He's still alive. I think he's Dr. Hurt. Why did Dr. Hurt dress up as Thomas Wayne? Why did he say that, this is his empire and he's reclaiming it? Is Dr. Hurt really somebody that's lived that long and come through history? Is he really Thomas Wayne, just not Bruce's dad? Is he that other Thomas Wayne that we saw in the past? That's how I'm reading that. I think we've seen the origin of Dr. Hurt already. I don't know. I might be wrong here. I'm just curious to see. And I think the smear campaign that was laid out against the Wayne family that he portrayed to put himself back in this role, to be still alive, quote unquote. Dr. Hurt did all this to enable himself to insert himself into the Wayne family, to overtake the fortune, right?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. That's that part I think we're both in agreement on. I just don't know how much we can take this grandmother for her word as to what she's seen, what she knows. Because I don't know how much of her is there even.
It's interesting because this whole video, with this whole movie, the Black Love, it goes back to early on in Morrison's run with those heroes, all those heroes coming together and having this meeting, and we see Mayhew. I love that all this. I'm like, wow, everything that Morrison did, it was leading
is
to
getting
this.
tied into, yeah.
Yeah, and it's really cool that there is a historical aspect to all this. I have to wonder how much of this Morrison knew then. Did he know when he was starting out that he was going to do this? I have to believe to a certain extent he did.
I think he did because the way everything's playing off each other and the way things are connecting now, he had to have at least a plan, if not a laid out outline of something that's going to happen here. Or maybe when he was doing RAP, he thought about, okay, yeah, I'll tie in this kind of stuff here that way. But there had to have been some type of planning that he was doing, way back then to to now present. Because you think about it, when RAP first came out, and at the different panels, everyone would say, hey, what's going on here? Everyone, on the panels just saying, trust him. He knows what he's doing. He has a plan. And I think back then, when this thing was first hitting and everyone was first saying, he knew where this was going to go.
Yeah, it's something that it just amazes me. And it's something I like about creators having a decent run on a title. Is that you get a chance to lay out clues, especially when they know they're going to have a decent run. Because not every creator has the opportunity to know, hey, I'm going to have enough time to actually pull this off in my run. And that's something that... I'll give you a great example of this. Justice League, with what happened with Black Canary. It's clear that Dwayne McDuffie had plans to redeem her in that story and never got to play out.
Right.
So his longevity on the book actually deeply affected that storyline, which in my eyes, set up path on for Justice League, the turmoil that was there for so long. We had Vixen's team that never took off, but then never really got to go to fruition, and it just left that book kind of in turmoil when I was really digging it with Black Canary as the leader. And Justice League was okay after that all happened, but it never quite got to that point until, at least for me, until recently. But I do think that's one of the advantages of a writer like Grant Morrison, knowing that he has the time. He's actually going to get a chance to finish and tie up his stories. And now he's starting this whole thing with Batman Inc. and going in a whole new direction. Now, I'm pretty convinced that keeping Dick Grayson as Batman was not in the cards.
Probably not. I think that's just something new that they're seeing, and seeing how popular the character is and seeing how much the fans are getting behind Dick Grayson as Batman, and they're enjoying it because he is a different Batman. But he still has that true to the roots and the core that makes Batman cool, but there's just that change in it that it's personalized to Dick Grayson. Definitely think that wasn't in the plans for it to continuing on.
Matches Malone at the door of doing the internet, and I don't mean that he's playing the character of Matches Malone, but one of the things I've always loved about Bruce is his ability to don different disguises and become different characters. Even though he's not wearing a quote-unquote disguise per se, and this is really meant as a joke, he sells it so well right at the beginning and never loses character. And to the point where actually Marcia has to explain that he's just joking around, and that, he's with me and let's come on in and do all that. I loved the moment because we get to see the detective work where he looked at the butler and was able to pick out things that, here, I can use this, and this. Sleight of hand, I know every little thing about you now because of what we're doing. I'm able to surmise this information. Very Sherlock Holmes. I love that element of it. And there was something about that for me I immediately connected with because it's the best of what I like about Bruce. And it's one of the reasons why did I want Bruce back so bad? These moments. These are things that you only get with Bruce. I like the way Dick Grayson compensates and does his own thing, and he's made Batman his own role. It's why I'm a fan of Dick Grayson staying as Batman now, where I was screaming that he should be Nightwing in the beginning of all this. But this is why I want Bruce back. This is something that is unique to Bruce. And I would not want to see Dick become this the same way. Because I think you would lose what makes the character of Dick Grayson. And I think a lot of Nightwing fans who are listening to this are going to agree with me. If you're going to keep Dick Grayson as Batman, you can't lose what makes him unique. You can't make him Bruce. If you make him Bruce, there's no point to it. if you keep the qualities that make him Nightwing and you advance him further by doing it, then there's a point to the whole thing. But I don't want to lose Bruce either, because there's a way to advance him through all this. And that's where I think it's grabbing me now in a way I didn't expect to say it. I said at the beginning, and I'm going to stand behind what I said I did not want to see multiple Batman. I was against the idea. I was wrong. I'm into it.
You know, something, a little subtle thing that I didn't really notice until, recently, until multiple read-throughs. Marcia, with her chain smoking habit. At first I didn't even think twice about it, but then I started thinking about just how nervous she has to be, how much pressure right now is riding on her.
Oh, that's cool.
And that's a nervous habit for her. That's her telling that she's not what she appears to be. And I love the fact that it was in there. I'm like, dang it, I should have seen that earlier.
And later, Bruce does acknowledge that he should have caught it.
Yeah.
Because he does say when they're in the graveyard sequence and she's whapping him that he should have seen the signs. He makes mention to that. So I love that, it's funny, I didn't notice the chain smoking as being from nerves until you just said it. So I've read this book multiple times too. I never made that correlation. I think I was more focused on Bruce's reaction to the smoking, how it was something that made him uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, he's got a collapsed lung, so that's a little bit hard thing to have around. And
I think it's funny. It shows where my weakness was. I was so sitting with Bruce that I never caught it. Yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up, because it did add something to it. Poor Roderick.
I feel so bad for the guy. And it's funny because later on, when they're at that asylum and they're talking, we find out that it wasn't even an accident that happened to him. When the one doctor throws out when he's talking, to Carter, and he's like, "Hey, remember what happened when Roderick Kane didn't play along?" Kind of deal. I was like, "Oh my God, poor Roddy! It just wasn't even an accident. It was because he wasn't in the game with them." I'm like, "Oh no."
Well, no, this is what the whole smear campaign is. Marcia, and how much of that is Marcia responsible in some way for what happened to Roderick? Because
Marcia.
Yeah, Marcia.
I've been dying to say that all since we started recording, by the way.
So then, are you taking that Betsy's Mrs. Brady, and that's Dad?
No. Oh, no. I didn't even know.
This is a real twisted, gangster Brady Bunch. So then, we got Marcia's, so who's Greg? Is Bruce Greg?
Oh, Bruce is Greg.
Okay.
Bruce is so Greg.
Yeah. I never thought I'd ever say that, but I guess role-wise it fits. Wow. So who's Jan? Martha? Or is she Alice? I don't know. Because didn't Alice have the bowling guy or whatever she was dating regularly?
The meat market guy.
The meat market guy. Would that be Thomas
Sam
Wayne?
the Butcher.
Sam the Butcher's Thomas Wayne? I don't know. We'd have to really talk for a while to cast this one. I don't know that I want to cast a very Batman Brady Bunch movie.
Yeah, this would be a very tough one.
It would take some serious thinking, and I don't know that I want to dwell on it too much. It's funny that you went to the Brady Bunch aspect on it, though. Now, when they go to Wayne Manor after all this, you wonder how much of this starts to click with Bruce. Maybe not necessarily knowing who he is, but the sense of foreboding, the sense of familiarity. Where does it put his mind being at this place? They had a son, right? And the whole story about them witnessing the whole thing. Does he feel some connection here? The irony of him being the one that they use to kind of, put, like I said before, the final nail in the coffin of this smear campaign is really ironic. The graveyard aspect, though, when he's exploring the graveyard and this Alan and Catherine Wayne, I'm going to admit this, I would love a mini-series about the Wayne family, throughout the history, kind of get to know the family tree. I don't know how many other people would agree with me on that, but I'm that much of a Batman junkie that I'd actually like to know more about Alan and Catherine Wayne.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. I'd like to see the Wayne family and go through just the backlog and the backstories of who are the Waynes, who is it that made Bruce to who he is today. Because you do get a lot from your family, you do get a lot from what your families learned from their family and from their family, kind of deal. So yeah, definitely, I think it would be interesting, a story. But then again, you and I look at this a little bit differently. I think I don't know if there'd be a general public cry for, give us the backstory on the Waynes.
Well, I think you could do it, though, through telling, if I'm right on who Dr. Hurt is, that he genuinely is Thomas Wayne from the past, to do a miniseries following him and how he got to where he was at present day. Because there's a lot of stuff off. If this is who the guy is, and I'm making assumptions here, admittedly, I could be dead wrong, but if this is that Thomas Wayne from the past that we saw, and he somehow survived all this time, then couldn't we, follow him, at least through his era? Because I'm assuming he's had multiple connections with Wayne family. Did he cause the death of more Waynes than we realize?
I'm thinking probably. I think, the definite ties to the Hurt in the Wayne family is huge. He is probably, that original Thomas Wayne that we've seen in the past and everything. So I don't know. I definitely want to know more about Hurt, and I don't think his story is done with this. I think this isn't just the epilogue filling in some of the holes from R.I.P., those little stuff that now you know the rest of the story. There's more to come for Hurt. There's more to come from Batman and him and Bruce and him and whatnot.
While they're waiting for Carter at the sanitarium or, wherever you want to call that spot, and the guy says, Batman, beware the hole in things. Did he actually speak to Bruce, or are you taking that's his subconscious? Because part of me was thinking to myself, is this where we're starting to see the first signs of what we see at the end? That his mind has been clicking it all together? His mind never stopped working once he started reading the book in the beginning?
I actually took it that maybe he did say something, that it actually did come out of him and it wasn't in his mind, but I'm thinking it's more of the fact that he's got all this Omega energy inside him, that he's maybe able to tap into something from this guy. Because, one, you look at it, this is a military, sanitarium, so this is, maybe it's that connection of soldier to soldier kind of deal, warrior to warrior kind of, interconnection and inner code. So maybe Bruce heard it in his, mind, and it wasn't actually a vocal thing, but I think that did come from that guy.
But the guy said, Batman, beware.
Right.
He didn't say, like, fella beware or anything like that. He specifically referenced Batman. Bruce doesn't even know that he's Batman. But I guess my question is, does Bruce know subconsciously? And is that what we saw in that moment? I don't know. And dude, wait, and I'm not taking anything away what you just said. You may be 100% correct. And this is one of those things where, you've talked about it on the show before, where, like, in a certain read-through, you did this. My latest read-through, I hit that moment and I'm like, maybe she's right. Maybe the guy didn't say anything, and that was Bruce's head, telling him things. This was, Bruce's way of, you hear all the time about people subconsciously, their minds kind of dealing with situations that are going on around them that they can't explain. The mind compensating. The mind's a very complicated thing. Is Bruce's mind, which we know to be one of the stronger minds in the DC universe, is Bruce's mind compensating for what he's going through? Did his clues in his journals start to click here? Is this the first of many steps to what we see at the end of this? I don't know. I'm fascinated by this story, and we did the same thing during R.I.P. And I think this is a good point to talk about the connection that this has to the type of storytelling we got with R.I.P. What I loved about R.I.P., there was an unfolding mystery that you're deeply glued into trying to dig beyond the pages to figure out what Batman knows and how much is there. And the end result's going to be, I think we all know that we're going to find out he knew a whole bunch of stuff that we never realized he knew. He connected the dots in ways we never possibly could. But I love going along on this ride. And it's something that I find that's very interesting about this story, is that I actually care to dig deep beyond the pages. I don't do this with all my books. There are certain select titles that invoke this kind of emotion. I talk about this in Gail Simone's work a lot of times. This is something, and it's something in these Batman titles when Morrison writes them. Tony Daniel did this, though, recently. Remember when we were trying to speculate who Arkham was? Mm-hmm. I mean, who was the Black Mask, and it turned out to be Arkham. But we were speculating about this and really got into the whole mystery of it. So, there's certain titles where, and I think it's important in a Batman story that you get this feeling. I don't necessarily need to feel this same way when I'm reading Superman. I think when we just talked about Grounded before, we were digging deeper into it for different reasons than we are here. It's a different sort of story. And this fits very much what I'm looking for in a Batman tale.
Well, in a Batman tale, the underlining story, I want to be a mystery that
yes,
that I get the clues and I see if I can solve it. with Batman, and because that's part of my joy of reading a good, cool Batman story. It's not about seeing him beat up bad guys. It's about the detective angle of it. It's about the intellectual side of Batman. That's something I'm getting, I really enjoy out of this whole ride, has been that factor. Just that, what about this? What about that kind of deal? And when he's at the sitting there talking to the guy who can't talk, and they ask him about the book, he's like, it's a story close to my heart, you could say. The plot got a few holes, but I think it's starting to make sense. And for me, that right there was a solid statement in that he is starting to figure out who he is, what's going on.
Now, this is interesting. As this story's going on, and it continues, we get to see more of this mystery of the smear campaign of the Wayne family. She talks about why a bat. They want him to dress up like Thomas Wayne was murdered. I mean, like Thomas Wayne was dressed at a Halloween party, I should say. But this is leading to Martha murdering this guy the detective, right? Not Thomas Wayne. They want footage of Martha murdering the detective hired by her parents.
Right.
So what a bizarre situation here. So are they trying to show us then that not only that Thomas is still alive, but Martha is as well?
Well, this is going to be the smear campaign against Martha, and going along with the fact that she did this murdering, she did this heartless thing, and kind of, I don't take it as they're not going to say that Martha's still alive. They're going to use this as the campaign against her and her family. And because you think about it, her family is the ones who did turn down Hurt. So they messed with Roddy a little bit by giving him the stroke and all that, paralyzing him. And now they're going to do the extra, one more turn on top of it. Let's have some footage that shows Martha Wayne is a murderer as well. So let's really destroy this family.
Yeah. So you think it's just destruction for the sake of it. Yet there is that reference that Hurt promised them eternal life by doing this. Why? Well,
that's the sacrifice. That's the sacrifice to the demon.
For the ceremony.
Yeah. So this is a twofold thing. This is not only just to destroy the family for financial gains. This is also a sacrifice to a demon, because they got to get it timed with the moon and all that kind of stuff. We got to do the sacrifice right at this point in time, and we unleash the demon who's going to take us to the caskets that will give us immortality and all that kind of deal.
Now, see, I agree with that. The interesting part about that to me is that demon sacrifice. Did it happen before? Is that how Thomas Wayne's still alive? See, I firmly feel that Thomas Wayne is not a throwaway. I feel that is who Dr. Hurt is. I feel he genuinely is Thomas Wayne. He's just not Bruce's dad.
He's the Thomas Wayne from the past, and that actually could be. This could be why he did this sacrifice once before on this land, at this spot, at this exact moment in time. And that's how he got his immortality, his way to be who he is. This is now just the added pain to the families.
Here's the question, though. Is he still immortal? Does he have to have this sacrifice, a certain number, happen at every time this moon hits in order to maintain his immortality? I don't know. I'm curious to see what happens. I'm enjoying following Bruce in this because he's trying to solve multiple mysteries. I think he's clear that what he's doing with Marcia, there's something bigger going on, and he's not clued in on it. But then he's also trying to solve the mystery. I love that the John Valor pages, this is adding to what I was talking about with the guy in the courtyard. It seems like he is putting together puzzle pieces step by step here, that the box is somehow important, yet he doesn't know what its importance is. He's aware of the holes in what the current situation that he's in. Did you take the holes that the guy was talking about when he was in that parking lot to be Marcia's situation or holes in his own memory?
Oh, that's definitely holes in his own memory. That's just the pieces that he knows should be there. And it's not even just stuff he doesn't remember. It's stuff he knows, I should know this. There should be this information should be in me. I don't know why I should know this, but I know I should know this, and that is a hole.
Now, with Marcia trying to kill him here and having him set up like this, is this some way of showing them being a part of a demonic ceremony? Is it that, I guess that this is my real question is she really trying to kill the detective here, or trying to show her trying to kill Thomas Wayne to pivot why he would actually kill his wife to save himself? I don't know.
I took it she honestly is trying to kill him for immortality. She wants the sacrifice so she can live forever, and that's what she's going after. She wants, it's never been about solving the murder of the family. She's probably placated the grandmother to keep the grandmother going, maybe, milk some money out of the grandmother in this process. This is all about, just trying to make, get herself immortality.
Now, she's only taking on the role of Martha not permanently. She was taking on the role of Martha just for this sequence of events.
Right. She did. Hurt has his plan that he's not really letting everyone in on. The fact that he's got this game plan where he wants this massive smear campaign against the Wayne family, against the Kane family, against all of these people, so that he could, either take over the funds, take over control of it. Who knows where his end game truly is, but it's not about the immortality. I think he already has his immortality. I think he's still good to go. I don't think he needs the recharge, because you see at the end, he's never upset about the fact that they lose out on the immortality. He's happy. He's got what he needed. He has the smear campaign stuff. He's got the different stuff that's going to take down the Wayne family and really make it hurt.
Now, what was it that he grabbed there? Is that the only way out was in the box?
Well, that one doctor scientist friend of theirs who was looking into kind of time travel and all that stuff, that's his box.
Right.
And, Bruce figured out that not only, here's my guess, Bruce figured out that to break the whole dark side loop, he has to jump before the regular time jump. This wasn't the normal time jump that pulled him. This was a Bruce Wayne-initiated time jump, and he did it by using that guy's box.
And that's why, because I truly felt like that was the pivotal moment here. That when he grabs that box, this is where everything clicked for him. I don't think seeing the bat around him and all that okay, here's my question. When he hits that, is this now him jumping to the far future where we saw him in the beginning when he first encounters Superman and all them, telling them that he's got a plan?
Could be.
And then the him that we see at the end of this, is that him coming back from that far future? Because that's him in their time bubble, right? Remember he stole their time bubble and left them there? And he was dressed in that weird outfit?
Yes.
So did we see him here when he grabbed the box jump to the far future to be the guy that we saw earlier on take their time bubble to come to present day? So going off of what you're saying, has he now bypassed it?
I think so.
And left that energy at the end of time and released that energy at what would be considered the end of time? Did he beat them by jumping to did he beat Darkseid by jumping to the end of time and releasing it there at the vanishing point?
Yes. Actually, I think that's it. He jumps, he uses, because the guy was talking about how there's an immense amount of energy required to work this time capsule. Well, right now, Bruce is an immense amount of energy in that he is this, the pure Omega energy going into him. So his Omega energy charges the box, sends him to the end of time, where he releases, thus destroying that era, steals the time bubble, comes back. Now, the only question is, why, when he comes back and he appears at the end of this issue, does he look completely different than what he's looked everywhere else? Is there a path between, that stealing the time bubble and arriving at the Hall of Justice?
I would say yes. I would say there's something that's bound to happen in the future that puts him at this point. I don't know, because we've seen it every era. There was something bat-like about him, and I agree with Tim. I don't think the Bruce we're getting back here is 100% himself yet. Or do you think that he is?
Dark side connection to him?
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm curious to see what happens here. This is very interesting. I've actually. This is why I wanted to discuss this so much, because it was a book to me. There was so much mystery when I was reading this. I felt like it answered a bunch of questions. It connected the dots more with what was going on in the past with the smear campaign from Dr. Hurt. And, here's was one of my questions, Martha, or Marcia. I kept thinking to myself, I'm like, is she too old to be Jezebel Jet?
Oh, she's definitely not Jezebel.
And I agree. But this is where my mind was kind of going all over the place with this, trying to connect to everything that Morrison's done previously. I think I dove too far a lot of times. And even in this discussion, I feel that I did. Like when we were talking about like her trying to kill him, what were they trying to do there? I think that was me grasping farther than I needed to instead of just accepting what was right in front of me. And I actually agree with your assessment of what was actually going on there. You pulled me back in that sequence. But I think what we saw when he grabbed the box is him jumping to the far future. And I've felt that since my first read-through, that he is, in some level, he went beyond where he was supposed to go. And that we've seen him come full circle.
Yeah, definitely.
Because the outfit clearly matches what he looked like in that issue. Even though it's a different artist. I mean, it's clearly, if you take a look at the, I guess the thready look of the cape, that matches what we saw from him when he had that mask on earlier on in the earlier issues, which is interesting. It's interesting how Red Robin is trying to build some kind of totem to help neutralize the Omega charge. Does that still need to happen?
Maybe there's still some remnants in him that needs to be expelled out before we get the full-on Bruce back.
The Bruce, I like that.
Well, we got Bruce, but is he Bruce?
But is he Bruce? Yeah. I'm just joking with you because I agree with you. I'm actually in the same place. What a fantastic series. I think what I love about it is I'm still questioning a whole bunch of junk after I've got done with this issue. I still don't feel like I understand every little tiny detail of which is typical in a Morrison work. Because I do feel like there's times where I'm reading it, I'm like, I'm a moron.
And I still 100% think that this issue wasn't just about RIP, it's about the next story arc with Hurt. Hurt's not done yet, and I think we're going to see stuff from this play out in that. Like, maybe we'll find out who that Marcia is in the next story arc.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't think Hurt's done either. I do think we're going to see certain amounts of closure to it in issue. I'm curious to see in issue 6 how much we deal with Dr. Hurt. Is he going to come up again? Because he is in present day, isn't he?
Yeah.
We've seen him in this in present day.
Yeah, that's why I think we're going to see him next.
Or we saw him in Batman and Robin.
Yeah.
So is this all going to then connect with Batman and Robin? Is issue 6 and Batman and Robin going to connect with this? I don't know. I'm curious to see how this all plays out. Because maybe that's why... Is that why he's under the radar right now? For more than just analyzing his allies, is he also going to swoop in and, get the one-up on Dr. Hurt? I don't know. I'm curious. Fun story. Really, really, really a fun time to be a Batman fan.
I'm going to need something to wear in a very big truck.
Sure. Anything else?
I'll need some guys. Not these guys, because, well, they're kind of dead.
I am here with Brian David Johnson of Screen Future, the future of entertainment, computing, and the devices we love. And actually the title right away grabs me because for me, the entertainment medium, one of the reasons why I'm a comic fan, one of the reasons why I'm a techie and love video games and computers and all that, is because I'm a school teacher during the day. I adore my job, but work has its stresses. Life has its stresses.
Right.
And the entertainment mediums that we all love to explore are really our escape from all that.
Right.
Can you tell our audience a little bit about Screen Future and what the book's about and how it connects to them?
Certainly. So I am a futurist at the Intel Corporation. So it's my job to come up with a vision for computing in the year 2020. So this book, Screen Future, kind of looks at what's the future of entertainment. So the future, when I say entertainment, I mean TV, movies, games, application, comics, books, all of that. And the reason why I picked entertainment, just as you said, is I think it's a really interesting way of thinking about technology. Usually when we think about technology, we think about productivity, we think about speeds and feeds and all the good stuff. But one of the things that I did about 5 years ago at Intel was said, well, what if we think about entertainment as being the leading experience across all computers, across all computational devices? And it turns out when I went I'm at a big engineering company, and when I went to them and said that, they loved it. They're like, what if we think about it not only for TVs and PCs, but handhelds, sort of anything, in-car, all those applications. So really, I think focusing on entertainment is so important because it really is at the center of people's lives. It literally is at the center. TV's at the center of their living rooms. But it really, if you think about it, so much of our lives, that's our escape. That's kind of where we go to.
And actually, if you look at the entertainment medium in general, what drives a lot, what are the first resources to use the higher-end technology?
A lot of times it's your television shows, your films, your games, your video games, your PC games. Actually, every time new graphics cards, new chips come out and things like that, what people are usually buying them first before they go mass market? It's your gamers and people like that looking for the entertainment end of it. So there is a nice connection between that medium, not just in content, but also in resources where people are pulling from them because of the entertainment first.
Right.
And then it kind of spreads out into more of your productivity that you're talking about, where then it becomes more mass market. So that's interesting.
One of the things that I've seen while I was here, actually, about sort of the future of entertainment, as we were talking before, is that I think if you want to see where the future of entertainment is going, just look at where the future of comics is going. The comics industry, for me, is fascinating. Now, I'm a comic book geek from way, 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 way back. You know, I cut my teeth on Scrooge McDuck and worked my way up into Thor and Spidey and all that.
Right.
So, you know, I very much sort of come out of that. I'm a complete geek about it. But after I wrote the book and we started going around talking to people, it really became obvious that if you looked at comics just aren't comics anymore. Comics are movies, comics are TV, comics are gaming. If you just look at all the great stuff going on here at Comic-Con New York City, it is really, really vibrant and really, really rich. And if you begin to look at how kind of comics are spreading basically away from that book or away from that graphic novel onto your laptop, onto your iPhone, onto your iPad, onto your PC, it's interesting because the comic book industry is really diversifying, I think much like the entertainment industry is diversifying as well.
You know, and I've noticed the reverse coming as well, where a lot of those mediums are now coming back to comics. I watch shows like Fringe and True Blood and things like that, and they all have comic books now that are expanding that universe. So there's a nice energy where it's cyclical. It takes each of those mediums in a different direction and expands our access to them. It's no longer isolated experiences where we finish watching that program and we're done.
I'll one-up you there. So I was having a conversation with Chris Warner. He's one of the senior editors from Dark Horse.
Okay.
And so I know Chris pretty well, and we were just talking about comics, the same sort of thing. Because I talk about it all the time with anybody who will listen. And he had this great idea. He said, you can think of comics because comics are so intensely creative, and you can't fake it in comics. I mean, in some other places you could fake it maybe with some good graphics or some good special effects, but you can't fake good storytelling, good characters, good plot in comic books because it's really, really competitive. And so he said you could really begin to think of comic books as this huge creative engine that's really sort of driving all these other TV, games, movies, all that forward, that there's so much rich imagination that's going on in comics, and it's a cage match to actually get out there and get that idea in front of people. I just love that idea that comics are where you can't hide. The weak can't hide creativity.
Well, and one of the great things about comics is the fact that because people can spend as much time as they want to on the panel or a page when they're reading it, they drive how fast the experience goes as they go through it. You're right in the sense that a person can look at that and study it and wrap their mind around it, and you can't hide things in the crack. You can't speed past it and say, it's only 3 seconds, it'll go. It doesn't work that way. Yep. And that is one of the great things about the medium and its storytelling is the fact that you can read it 2 or 3 times. You can take it with you when you're done, and mentally, and kind of explore the depth. It's one of the things we like to chat about on the show is the themes in comics. And the fact that it's not just what you read on the page. It's not just what the artist has drawn. It's a lot of times what they leave you with when you're done.
Or what's in the gutters, or what's in between the panels as you sort of move. Because I just think in a way, comic books there's no better medium for getting across complex ideas and complex characters, because you can come up with really good panels, and as you move from panel to panel, what's left in the gutter, people are filling in with their imagination, so it makes it so much more of a rich storytelling device than, say, a movie or, say, a game.
Which I think is incredible. The book Screen Future, where can people find this book?
You can get it online. If you just Google Screen Future, there's a couple different places you can buy it. You can certainly get it at Amazon.
Sure.
I mean, the book itself I originally wrote it about a year ago, and the idea was that if you start thinking about the future of entertainment and the future of all this sort of computing stuff, it really involves a lot of different businesses and a lot of different people. So it involves computer companies like Intel. It involves companies like Dark Horse Comics. It involves companies like Paramount Pictures. It involves people like Comcast and Cox. So one of the things I realized is that those groups weren't kind of communicating with each other. So the whole idea behind the book was to start having conversations with people about the future of entertainment. And about half the book is really me having conversations with people throughout the industry. So me having conversations with Paramount Pictures, me having conversations with CBS. So the whole idea and the whole reason for people is just to start that conversation. And if you Google Screen Future, it'll even come up with some sample chapters you can download for free.
Well, it's fantastic, which is great. A good chance for people to sample the book and really delve into it and then grab it.
One of the things I've always noticed, people in general were afraid of change. We try to do everything we can to stay status quo. But when you get into like the tech people, they're looking for the next big thing. They're looking for faster, better, brighter. And I always wondered, which came first, chicken or the egg? Is it the people who had that wanting something new, wanting change, were led into tech, or by going into tech, people became that way? What's your actual opinion on this?
I think it's kind of a worldview and a type of person, to be quite honest. I think the people in tech, and again, I'm a dyed-in-the-wool geek. So my first job was I worked in a computer lab when I was 10 years old. So I grew up sort of immersed in computing, and I think for a lot of those folks, as you're saying, the tech folks, it's about imagination. I think if you have an imagination and you think what are the possibilities, then you can, and it doesn't just have to be with high tech, but I think it happens on high tech is because if you can dream it in high tech, a lot of times you can build it. If you can dream it, you can write software. You can sort of have this much more optimistic way of looking at things. So I think you find it in high tech, but I think you find it in city planning. Sometimes you find it in local politics. Sometimes you find it in other places. But I really do think it's having that sort of imagination to really think, okay, what do I want? Where do I want things to go? And what could I build?
I agree with you. You know, it was funny, as you were asking the question, I was thinking to myself, a lot of what you just said does apply to the comic book fan as well. We are also looking for the next big thing. And you're right, and it applies when you're saying imagination. That is the connection there. Imagination in all of these type of culture, when you're talking about games, when you're talking about tech, when you're talking about comics, movies, television shows, we're all looking for that next big thing. Why do we like cliffhangers in television shows? Because we want the big thing next season that'll draw us in. I think you're right, and that all goes back to imagination. And I think that is where there's that energy and that connection between all of it. And I think it's true of anybody who has a strong hobby that they're really into. It's something that's really important to them, or something that's an important part of escape from their life a lot of times. Is that, you know, we're all looking for that imaginative thing that's going to take us further. Where can we go from here? Because that's what makes life exciting. Aren't you right?
Yeah, I think so. And I think the imagination is kind of a double-edged sword sometimes as well, meaning in a lot of areas. So I was up at PAX up in Seattle, one of the sort of big gaming convention, about 60,000 gamers, kind of having conversations like this, again, going and talking to as many people as I can about the future of entertainment. And we were talking about gaming and about where gaming was going to go. And again, there were a lot of comic book fans there, and we were kind of talking about, okay, what's storytelling and how do you take storytelling from comic books and where is it going? And one of the things that we started talking about is that where some places in gaming were falling down, they were having a failure of imagination. Because in a way, you're starting to have increased processing power on all these different devices, as you said, the next best, greatest, fastest sort of processors and graphics cards. You're starting to be able to play these games on your smartphone. You're starting to be able to play them on these sort of new smart TVs. You're starting to be able to do it. So you're not really bounded by technology anymore, right? You're not bounded by what we used to be bounded by, right? We don't have slow set-top boxes. We don't have slow phones. So now that when you have all this processing power, what they were saying is they thought that a lot of the gaming industry was suffering from a failure of imagination, that they were kind of failing to do that big wow, to go out there and think about further because they were sort of stuck in kind of the old way of doing things. And I think to bring it back to comics, that's one of the things that I see, that comics, again, being so vibrant, and there's so many ideas, and again, getting back to what Chris Warner was saying from Dark Horse, was that this is such an engine for creativity. I think you can always keep an eye, you always need to keep an eye on what's going on in the comic book industry, because it's always going to pop up.
And actually, it's funny when you mentioned the connection to gaming then. My favorite games are the ones where it takes the interactive experience in a different direction, or does something different. It can be the most simple game that's created, but they do something new. They give me a new way of thinking about how to play. Maybe it's a new control scheme that's innovative and feels right, and yet you're doing something that you've never done before in a game. Or it can be, you know, your big graphics powerhouse of storytelling, where it's telling a story with a richer depth and maybe branches on a level that you've never seen before, where the characters seem to come alive out of your screen.
Or some of these sort of social games that have come up from independent players, where it's not about the best motion graphics, the best physics, the best. It's about Farmville.
Absolutely.
It's about, I want you to come look at my farms and my crops. I mean, it's again, games being a way for people to communicate with one another.
I play Little Big Planet a lot on my PS3, and my wife is not a gamer, farthest thing from it. But through watching me play it, she got interested and said, hey, can I try that? I like seeing a lot more of your social gaming. I play Farmville with a lot of my coworkers, and it's great. These are people who I never would have discussed gaming with before on any level, because I know that they're not into that the way I am, but yet we are all playing a game together. And honestly, that keeps me coming back to Farmville, because it's not a game that I would have ever considered playing before, but just by the fact that they're like sitting there and they're interested in it, we have conversations at work about it. The social experience that goes beyond the game is something that I'm not used to when playing a game, because a lot of my experience with gaming has been single-player, isolated experiences, which I'm very comfortable with myself. And to then be broadened where I can have a social experience with friends and we're talking about this game where I'm farming. Which, I mean, and I'm laughing at it not because I'm trying to put the game down. It's one of the compliments I can give that game is the fact that it opened me up to the type of game. If you had told me 2 years ago I'd be playing a game about farming and I'd think it was great, I would have laughed. But yet that's where it works. It's because there's something about that game that's a hook. Keeps me coming back, and we like talking about it.
It's one of the most popular applications on Facebook. I mean, it's just a way. I mean, I think then you again begin to rethink, well, as you said, what gaming is, right? Is it that core? Is it that hardcore gamer of people getting into playing the first-person shooters or the role-playing games, or is it this sort of broader spectrum of players where it is about Farmville, and it is about being social, and it is about Spore, and it is about Solitaire, it is about Scrabble, it is about all these different things, where when you start thinking about gaming in that way, the number of gamers gets huge, and it's actually interesting when you recategorize it that way, the majority of gamers actually become women. There are more women online playing sort of social games and casual gaming than there are that sort of hardcore guy gamer that we all think of, and that we probably are. But yeah, as you start to redefine games in themselves, it completely changes, and that demographic widens out.
Right. And I think that's one of the great things nowadays is I think like comics. Why are we seeing so many independent publishers out there? Why are we seeing so many, even the big publishers, where they're producing comics that are a little outside of what you consider the norm? You know, and they're trying new things with the industry. Why are they doing that? Because they're finding that there's a broader audience out there to reach. There's a new audience that wants to approach these mediums in a different way. I think one of the interesting things about Farmville, too, when you talk about that, is the fact that because of the way that it's crafted, there aren't many machines that can't play it, if any. You know, I mean, it's one of those that's very easy to get running on a machine. There's no headaches involved in it. You just click on it and go in most cases. And I think that's what makes it accessible as well, is there's a low stress rate to actually get going on that. And I think that's part of the social medium of where's the future of computers going, is that there's diverse experiences available out there. You can appeal to the hardcore, you can appeal to the casual audience, you can appeal to the everybody audience, and I don't think there is one audience that you can appeal to in the future of computing.
Well, and I love that you brought up the rise of the independents, not only in comic books, but in gaming as well, because you start to see, and we saw it in it's not completely new, right? We saw it in movies about 20 years ago with the rise of independent filmmaking and sort of people being able to have these distribution arms that you couldn't have before, and part of that was driven by technology, cheaper cameras, the ability to kind of have better editing software. But one of the things I think is really interesting now that I kind of touch on in the book is as you begin to have entertainment migrate across all of these different devices, your distribution of the entertainment really begins to change, and there becomes a greater ability for independent producers to get their product out there and in front of people. I think in evidence, even by today, I think today at the show, you had a lot of the big comic book houses, right? I think it was Marvel and Dark Horse that are talking about how much they're going to charge for their online electronic comics.
Right.
And so even they're beginning to see that, okay, well, now that you've got an iPhone and an iPad and a smartphone and Android and smart TV, now you have a way to get out those comic book properties into the hands of people, and the distribution costs are so much lower, so you can have so much more innovation from those independent producers, and I think it's going to be really exciting.
One other thing when you're talking about independent gaming, because your PlayStation networks, your Xbox Live, and your WiiWare have enabled independent game creators to now publish games through that digital distribution. So now we're seeing games that are unique. It's a lot like what you see in Farmville, in the sense that a lot of these game companies are saying, hey, I can create a game on this platform and put it out, and we can publish to a worldwide downloadable audience that can try our game at a price point that works, where we don't have to do the full disc price point. We can do something a little bit less expensive and get a different audience base that way. I find myself checking out and downloading more independent games that way, because of the fact that the price point is one of those, and they do demos and things like that where you can actually try it out for free, which to me shows a lot of confidence from the independent creator in their product that they're doing, that they're putting out these demos for me to try out their game. And then I get pulled in, and I'm not killing myself at the price point to do it. And It's a great way to try new things and ideas.
Do you ever see an end game? Like that final level of technology and development that maybe, okay, this is it. We are now done at the end of our development, end of our technology levels.
Oh, I certainly hope not. I certainly hope not. I was actually having a conversation last night with somebody about this. I don't think so, because whenever there's innovation, there's anybody with imagination, I think you're always going to keep pushing it forward and always coming up with new experiences that you're going to have. So I don't think there is any end. I certainly hope there's no end.
I love the focus on imagination, because I do think that is the key. We're always going to have that. We're always going to want to, when we hit this point, we've got to have something more. Otherwise, what is there to look forward to?
Right, exactly.
Is there anything else you want to tell us about the book?
No, go ahead, go online. Again, just search Screen Future. It'll come up, and you can take a look at the first couple chapters for free, and there's a whole bunch of links to other articles about it, and appreciate it. Thanks, you guys, for having me on. I appreciate chatting.
Thank you much for giving us the time. It was really great to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Spinning with great speed, the Flash creates a protective vacuum around himself.
It's Amber Love with a reminder that bidding is already underway for this year's Wonder Woman Day comic book art auction benefiting domestic violence organizations. You can see all of the art that's up for bid at comicfusion.com. Click the Wonder Woman Day link and email your bids to bids@comicfusion.com. But better yet is to stop by the store and examine the pieces in person, because the scans that we have simply don't do them any justice. We have art donations from Billy Tucci, Neil Vokes, Tom Smith, Michael Golden, and Sergio Aragones, to name just a few of the 80 pieces available. The event at Comic Fusion is October 23rd to the 24th, where we will host Jamal Eigel, Ken Hazer, Nick Makoviak, and Charles P. Wilson. They will only be doing a limited number of in-store sketches, because we have over 80 pieces up for auction which need good homes, but you can purchase comics for them to sign. Get your picture taken with the 501st and our superheroes as well. If you visit Facebook, search for Wonder Woman Day V, because it's the 5th year, or again, our site is comicfusion.com. To get your interest really piqued, visit amberunmasked.com for interviews that I will be posting daily until the event. Thanks for your time, and I'll see you then October 23rd and 24th at Comic Fusion in Flemington.
He did just thank me, right?
Indeed, he did, sir.
Weird.
Okay, and we are back here live again from the floors of the New York Comic Con, and I am joined by
Sam Cavanagh from Canberra, Australia. How's it going?
Oh, going wonderful. How's it going, eh?
Oh, bloody hell. Having such a good con, actually. It's my first time not only at a convention, but outside of the country. And everybody down here in New York that I've met up with have been nothing but really pleasant, and it's been really nice to do. Last night I went out to dinner with some people that I only just met that day, pretty much. I know people from social networking like Twitter and Facebook and those sorts of things. I didn't expect this to be able to just kick around with a lot of people that I don't really know. Like coming to your table, like just coming and saying g'day to you guys was a awesome spectacle. Very cool.
I know, that's one of the things I love about comic books, about the comic book universe, about our community, the geeks that we have. This is just, it spans across the globe, and this is just a really cool statement of society. Because you even mentioned how like people are being nice to you and treating you wonderfully. Americans, New Yorkers, various people, we don't have always the best reputation around the world. But here we're saying, hey, we're not bad people. We're having all fun. Never met you before, having a ball, laughing and joking. Let's go out to dinner. Let's do some fun stuff here. That's just a really cool thing to see. Now, have you gotten the chance to walk around con, enjoy the con experience?
I've had a ball, actually. I've gone and spoken to people like, I got Michael Golden to sign a Doctor Strange sketch. I bought a Tony Harris page from Ex Machina. I got Darwin Cook to sign Parker the Hunter. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
I still haven't bought the new one because I have a rule that I don't cheat on my comic book store.
Yeah.
So anything I have the idea that I'm going to buy from their shop, I don't cheat on them.
But remember, what happens at New York Comic Con stays in New York Comic Con. So you can have a little indiscretions.
I'm out of the country. I'm out of the zip code. Is that the rule?
I think you're okay. I think you got it covered. Have a little bit of fun. Take advantage of some pretty good deals out there.
After I'm done here, I'm going to try to track down Peter Tomasi to get him to sign The Light Brigade.
Oh, cool.
That's a really awesome DC book. I thought about what I wanted him to sign, and I thought I'd get something a little bit more obscure than the Green Lantern stuff that he's been doing, which has been awesome. That book is fantastic. Have you read it?
What, The Light Brigade? No.
No, it's absolutely fantastic. It's got it's DC proper, but it's kind of like how The Mighty was a DC book, but it's not in the DC universe. It probably would have found a better home in Vertigo than in DC. It's kind of like Inglourious Bastards versus angels and demons and things like that. So they had angel Nazis versus some GIs, some American GIs in World War II. Very cool.
That actually sounds really neat. That's something I gotta put that in the memory banks, and I gotta look for that and pick that thing up.
Yeah, and it's got great Peter Snaberg art in it as well. He's the guy who did the second half of Starman, so it's absolutely awesome.
Well, that's cool. And that's actually through the different panels, through the different stuff. I've actually seen him talk and heard him and stuff like that. And he's one of those fun creators. He's a guy who actually, you can tell just by way he's up there, way he's interacting with the crowd and all that he enjoys what he's doing. He likes interacting with people. He's a friendly guy. And I can imagine he would appreciate you coming up with that thing as opposed to the current Green Lantern stuff and all that.
Well, it is something which I've really enjoyed, and it was something that I've reread over and over. I mean, I only bought it in trade. I didn't buy it in single issues. But you know what? That doesn't really matter. You buy it, you enjoy it. It doesn't matter what format you get it in. That's my theory on that.
It's the personal connection. And, and everyone, we all have our own things that we have personal connections to. We have our own things, our own stories that we just, we keep rereading over and over again. And every single time we reread it, we say, this is awesome. This is cool.
Yeah, and you pick up something new. That's why this medium is different. Any other visual medium or any other literature-based kind of medium, I think that you can go through and just skim the surface, but it's when you go down there and you dig and dig and dig and you get to those little subtle nuances that it just pops. It makes it so that you can reread it.
Man.
Re-experience.
It's funny when you start thinking about it. It's like I don't want to say like theater of the mind kind of deal, or it's all in your imagination. Because when I make statements like that, people may think I'm like belittling it or mocking it. I'm not. Yeah. But for me, one of the things I love about my comic books, I love about my reading experience, is those moments when I go beyond what I'm looking at, when I'm beyond what I'm reading. It's that off page when I start thinking, what if this happened? What about this? Or how would I have reacted to this situation if I had been in the column? How would I have dealt with this problem, this event, or this exciting situation? And those are the stuff that gets me with the comic books. Those are the emotional responses and the emotional attachment I have to this collection, to this hobby, to this lifestyle, if you will.
Yeah, and what you were saying there is a prime example of what Scott McCloud goes into in understanding comics. And it's something which I'm a comic book artist in my spare time, and it becomes quite noticeable when you try to put pen to paper that it's not about panel to panel, it's about the spaces in between those panels, spaces in between pages, page turns, the way that you can really focus people's viewpoints on that page as a whole. And I worry, probably unfoundedly, that the move to digital might actually take away from that, because you can't control a page turn when the page isn't there, and you can't control movement from panel to panel when sometimes you zoom into a panel and you're just viewing them as panel individually. So you're not really getting that idea of this is the first panel, this is the second panel. So,
and I agree with what you're saying, kind of about how if you're zooming in, but when you get some of those readers that allows you to keep it at full page spread, and it's like you're holding the book, it's the digital. That really, for me, is how I like viewing digital comics and viewing the digital medium. It's not about, that's, the thing that holds me back from really embracing it and, going, yeah, this is a cool thing. To be honest, I don't see, we're going to go to a full digital medium eventually. I guess in my lifetime, in your lifetime, we're going to see the paper book end. And I don't want that, and I don't want anyone thinking I'm saying, yeah, that's awesome. But on the other hand, I do accept it, and I do wonder, when we go to a full digital medium, is it going to change? Maybe as you're sitting there reading this story, maybe they could have a little extra something in there with theme music or something going on with, kind of shifting colors going, where it's not just a flat color thing, but it's, like you got a smoke scene where the smoke is shifting back and forth kind of deal. Maybe there's a next evolution of comics coming.
An amalgamation between motion comics and the paper medium as a whole. Yeah, but I remember, because I listen to the podcast, that you don't like listening to music when you... what was it?
No, I do like listening. I do like
said that he doesn't.
Well, he's actually started getting into it a little bit more. And it's, to be honest, some of the stuff I've kind of drifted away from some of the music a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's where I'll go through periods where I'll go with a purely instrumental music base, like a lot of. I was listening to some jazz stuff, some classical music.
Yeah.
And then I was going to shift, and there's a couple titles where I was throwing some metal in. And I was listening to some Metallica, just kind of thrashing in the background, and part of me started kind of like getting a little distracting myself sometimes. So when I start seeing that, I turn it off and then I focus back on. It's a weird thing. It all depends really on the title and on what I'm reading. Whether I really like the background stuff or whether I want just pure focus, boom.
Because it's like a good meal is accentuated with a nice glass of wine.
Exactly.
But if one is overpowering the other, you can definitely notice. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of that, it's like kind of definitely a nice meshing of, your environment.
Absolutely.
I've read a couple comics here on the panel floors, and we got a lot of ambient noise and stuff going around, and a lot of times someone will walk up to the booth, hey, how you doing? You got to stop reading, kind of stuff. So it does throw me off my game. It throws me off the reviewing. And I got to go back and reread it. So it's funny with presence and just where you're doing what's going on around you does affect the reading experience.
Yeah, exactly. I also just wanted to say thanks for the podcast. I listen to it pretty much every. No, I sometimes skip some episodes because they're collected editions that I'm going to pick up in trade or a few things like that. But I always go back and listen once I've gone and picked up those issues or picked up those trades. But it's the Speeding Bullets episodes I really enjoy because it's like you're having a conversation with mates down at the pub over a beer. So just wanted to say thanks for the podcast. I really enjoy it.
Well, thank you very much. Any current titles you're reading? What you're currently doing?
I really am enjoying I've been collecting Green Lantern since as long as I can remember. I've got every issue since 1971, and that's well before I was born. So I'm still enjoying Brightest Day as well. I'm not getting the tie-ins for that story. I'm purely relying on that mini-series, but which means I don't know what that Black Adam Jr. is doing at the moment. I have no idea, which is probably a shame that they're not really putting any recaps for that series or Generation Lost, which I'm not getting either. But so we don't know what's happening with that. So
I'm getting all the titles, and with right now they're just introducing what's going on with him. So there's been the one big reveal about him, about how he's got to bring back ISIS, because already was in Brightest Day. He really doesn't know how to go about that. So they are kind of keeping you abreast of all the other people in there, even though they have their main focus stories that they're playing out in there. So there is a pretty good connection to it. So, but I'll actually be curious to see when this is done. See how your overall experience is going to be definitely different than mine, because I'm getting all the Brightest Day titles. So,
I had to make some cuts. So, I got rid of that as well as Green Arrow. I just had to. But then the Ex Machina finished, so that was another one. And I think, getting into the whole bandwagon about DC and price point and whatnot.
Go ahead, say it, I do.
$2.99 going down to that.
Yeah.
That's going to get me to buy more books.
And it was awesome because I was at the one panel, the one DC Nation panel, and Dan DiDio, he's a jokester, he has fun with you, but he got really serious there for that, that moment, and he's like, you know what, you guys have supported us, through some tough times. We see your problems. We recognize the economy. We see your complaints. We tried to give you a little bit more bang for your buck when we went up to $3.99 by fleshing out more pages or by putting the backup stories, but that wasn't helping. That wasn't working for you. So we're going back down to $2.99, and it's going to stay there. It's $2.99 and hold. And I love that, just the fact that they recognize what the fans are going through, and they're like, hey, we're going to give back to you. You supported us, we're going to support you. And that was a cool move.
And you're going to see more people trying new titles. You're going to see more people picking up a trade every now and again, picking up some things that they would never even try before, like great Vertigo titles like Sweet Tooth and things like that they may not have tried in the past, and it's going to be very, very interesting.
And especially you look over the long run, like with multiple titles, that dollar price drop. People say, "Oh, what's $1?" Well, if you have multiple titles, that's going to save you some money over the end.
Well and truly, I mean, or in Australia, we don't get $2.99. It hasn't been $2.99 since I was in high school. So it's probably going to still be a fairly pricey endeavour. Probably still going to be about $4 down in Australia, despite the fact that the Australian dollar is quite strong at the moment. But that's beyond the point. It's still going to be the fact that I'm going to pick up more trades. I'm going to pick up more titles that I've never tried before. Things like Hellboy and whatnot.
Cool. Thank you very much for being on the show, man.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
I want to throw my 2 cents worth on this because I'm sorry, I was actually at a panel when Jim and Sam were talking, so I didn't have a chance to be a part of this. First of all, it's funny, I was the one on the show that was an advocate and pushing for more digital, and I'm still an advocate for that. I am actually a firm believer that as long as there's people who are saying what they said in this conversation, that they don't want to see exclusively digital, that they still want paper, there will continue to be paper. There's too many paper fans right now. I look at digital as being either something as a supplement for fans who are already getting paper or an avenue to new readers. For myself, there's comics that I'm reading now, like Fringe is a great example, that I've mentioned it multiple times on the show. I picked up the first Fringe series from Wildstorm on the app. And there's certain titles where I wouldn't mind having, repeat copies of them on the app. But I'm finding that the app's wonderful for books that I haven't tried before. Especially when you get into that 99-cent price point. That seems to be a sweet spot for me for older material. I really like the 99-cent price point. But for me, I'm a fan of the paper. Which, people be going, wait a minute, Sean, you were the one that was talking about digital on the show so much. I love digital. I think it's a great idea. I have an iPad. It looks fantastic on there. And I'll actually agree with some of Jim's comments in this conversation that the iPad and that size of a screen and these other touchpads that are coming out throughout the year, I know there's a lot more on the horizon. I think one of the advantages of those larger screens is that it's going to give you that page-turning experience that Sam was talking about. But I don't think it's going to be a replacement for paper. I think that there's going to be some opportunities to do stuff that's exclusively digital that I think is going to do some of the things where Jim was talking about bringing in multimedia. But also, it being just what would be a traditional paper comic, I think for a lot of creators it's going to be a cheaper avenue towards getting their product out there. I think it's really going to be good for independent creators to a certain extent, and I do think it's going to be good for the main publishers as well to get comics in the hands of people who never touched them before at a price point that is a little bit more welcoming than the paper product. But those of us that are diehard fans and collectors, and this was actually a great, at the New York Comic Con on the Sunday Conversation panel, this was brought up, and they talked about the fact that there are going to be collectors who, the collector's medium is the paper medium. I think there's going to be a new kind of digital collector, but for those of us that have been collecting paper for years, we're still going to want that. And, I think I look at it as the same thing as people said when trade came out. Well, when the trade came out, people were all saying, oh, this is going to be the death of the monthly. I'm not afraid of the death of anything. The only reason why it's going to die is if we stop buying that medium. If we stop buying the paper comics, are they going to die? Sure. But if there's a bunch of us that's still interested in it, they're going to keep publishing them because there is money to be made. So, that's something we need to remember. The only time that'll change is if, we change our preferences. And maybe there will come a point in time where Jim's envisioning where maybe we'll all prefer digital. I don't see that now. I see a mixture, and I think it's going to be a hobby that I think there's going to be that nostalgia niche that's always going to be there, but I would love to see digital lead to comics becoming a little bit more mainstream again and touching a new audience, and I'm hoping that digital does that. I look at it more as like the direct market versus newsstand when I was a kid. You could get comics on the newsstand, they were at a certain price point, but there was that direct market version you could get on a little higher quality paper that was for the collectors. I think that the digital offers what used to be, quote unquote, the newsstand, and opens up a different avenue there. And I'm hoping that publishers start looking at it more that way and price their comics accordingly that way. I don't see that being the death of it, though, and I think there's ways, I do feel there's firmly ways to partner up with comic shops to make this work and beneficial for them. They talked about at the Sunday panel, Dan DiDio and Jim Lee were talking about, and actually the new vice president, I apologize for just forgetting his name. He was actually from Wildstorm previously. He has now been promoted, and he's the new vice president for digital. And I love his whole enthusiasm with the fact that there's a lot of different things they can do with digital. It's not just a matter of transferring comics to digital. It's how can we make this experience more enjoyable for paper fans, for new digital fans, and really what is the market looking for out of digital. So they're really exploring this right now as a new venture, not as something that's set in stone. And I like the idea they were talking about, hey, is there a possibility for it to be done as a pack-in like your Blu-ray releases where there's a code that you get in your comic books to get a digital copy. They said, is that something that we're going to head to down the road? I don't know. But they were throwing out all kinds of different ideas where there's possibilities of things they could do with digital comics as this starts to grow. So I thought that was kind of cool. When they were talking about music on there, I've never said on the show that I don't like listening to music when I read my comics. Actually, it was listeners of the show calling in about music that made me say that I'd like to try doing it. I do find for myself, like Jim was talking about listening to Metallica when he was reading comics. I can't listen to Metallica, not because it's metal music, it's just the opposite. It's got words. I need to listen to instrumentals, and it doesn't matter what genre. I actually really like the diverse kinds, because if you look at the movie soundtracks, like take a look at the Superman, the original movie soundtracks, the Donner films, and compare that to the recent Batman films by Nolan, which are a little bit more rougher. I think that I can listen to both of those because there's no words. I find that when I listen to songs with words in them and I'm reading a comic, it distracts me from the comic. Music doesn't do that. I don't listen to music every time I read comics, but I have done it now, and I quite enjoy it. I actually find that I also take those same soundtracks and I'll play them sometimes when I'm playing video games, just because I like hearing, that music, and it's not distracting from what I'm doing there. So it's actually opened up an avenue of me using instrumental music in ways that I never have before because it was brought up on the show. But I think it's a very cool thing to do, and if you haven't tried it, pick some of your favorite instrumentals and try it there. Go ahead and try the musics with words too. The Metallica one was like, Jim, I'm like, wow, you can really keep concentrating on your comic while listening to Metallica? More power to you. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing to throw out. The $2.99 price point, I know we've brought this up on the show previously. I was glad to hear them talking about it again. I am hoping that it'll help smaller titles. I'm hoping that it will help people to try new things out across, not just in DC, just in comics in general. Giving people a chance to try some of the great things out there. I see too many cancellations in comics, and that really isn't just a commentary on DC. It's one of the reasons why we do the show that we do. I find that on the podcast, there's books that I'm reading that are just enjoyable and just okay. I would never drop them, but they're not books that I have anything interesting to say about, so we don't really talk about them much on the show. That tends to shift from time to time, which books are which. But I do find that I have those titles. My big frustration when we're doing this podcast, though, is you take a look. We talked about 2 great books in this particular episode. And I would not have cut those discussions in any way, shape, or form because they were really enthusiastic. There was an energy to it. Jim and I were just having fun, chatting, and I think that's something that hopefully comes across to you as the listeners. But sometimes there's times where we'll talk about 8 or 9 or 10 books on the show, and I still feel like I'm not getting to everything that's been released in the month that I would love to talk about. So that's why we don't bother talking about some of these other books, because I just really feel that I like our podcast theme, and I always have, and will always be the theme of Raging Bullets. It's really about promoting books that we're enjoying that we think people might like. And hopefully you can listen objectively to whatever we're talking about and make your own decision. You don't have to agree with us. I don't care about that. I'm hoping, though, that if you're thinking there's a title that stinks that you're not reading right now, because I don't have that experience with my comics, I'm hoping you'll juggle your list a little bit and find those titles that give you the same enjoyment that we're getting. always done that with my comics. I've jumped from time to time. I've been a DC reader. I've been mainly a Marvel reader. I've read Valiant. I've read Malibu. I've read Dark Horse. When that Legends line came out, I always kept a couple titles from each of the companies that I'm mentioning. But there were times where I'm like, you know what? I just need a little bit of a change. And it wasn't because of the quality. It wasn't because I thought the book stunk. It was just really because I needed a breath of fresh air. I think maybe if I'd stuck with those books too long, I maybe would have been bitter about it. I've never had that experience with comics. I just feel there's too much product out there. If I start feeling like I'm bored, I switch. And so and I'm not putting down people that look for those long collections, because I do have titles of mine, my Batman run, my detective run, they're unbroken. So I get that. I'm not, trying to mock anybody doing that. I'm with you. But I do think you need to find some balance in your collection. If you're finding your entire run, you're not finding that title that's passionate, the one that you want to really talk to people about, take some of your books and switch them up. Get some excitement in there. And I'm hoping this $2.99 price point opens up people to do that. Because that's part of the reason why I wanted to have this discussion, is because I do think that's where the $2.99 price point's going to work. And I urge comic companies to stick, to doing price points like that. There comes a point where you can keep raising the price in comics, and we're going to keep supporting our favorite titles, but then there's other titles that are dropping off and not getting supported, some of the lesser-known titles. And I need those in my list, too. It can't always be my top-tier characters. I love Batman. I don't want to only read Batman, though. And, that's from a die-hard Batman fan. He's my guy. I grew up with him. But if I only read Batman, I would have never read Hawkman. So, that's where, and on this show, my love for Hawkman now. So if it wasn't for the opportunity to be able to try out those titles, Starman, books like that, I would have never had that exposure. The Flash. The Mark Waid run of The Flash opened my mind to some brand new ideas about a character that I never really had much interest in. So, I urge you to really save some room in your pull list for a title that's a little bit lesser known, and hopefully, just switch it up if it's not for you, and then hopefully find those titles that are some niche ones that'll excite you. I want to tell you how much that I missed talking to you, Sam, because you were all the way over from Australia. And one of the things that I enjoy about cons, and Jim was kind of echoing this throughout his discussion, was really talking to our listeners, our friends. I'm sorry I didn't get to record with everybody who was there, but these were opportunities that I really enjoyed, whether it was a casual conversation we had in a line somewhere, a casual conversation over the table, or we actually got you on the show. Just thank you so much for the great time at the con. It was very cool. And Sam, I hope if you're not already back in Australia at this point, I hope when you do go back that you had a very safe trip, and it was great to meet you in person.
Through the magic alchemy of nature's most awesome sources of energy, Ray Palmer, atomic physicist, becomes the atom.
Hey there, Sean and Jim. It's Richard here, Lantern Savage from the boards. I was just listening to you guys at New York Comic Con, and I think we have to be eternally thankful for Jim's parents. I think they've averted the world's most dangerous crisis by keeping Jim away from Mr. Microphone. I don't think the consequences of that we will ever fully understand. I actually was just calling to rave about a couple of books that I was reading this month. First off is Batman Confidential number 49. It's kind of interesting that after about 5 months of having Batman fighting undead and vampires and werewolves and all these fantasy elements, they've really taken him back to this issue's a one and done, and they sort of take him right back to his detective roots, and you really kind of get to see him being the world's greatest detective. And even when he's not working on the case, there's sequences where he's running downstairs or he's using his grapple hook to get back to another floor when he's got no information to work on. His brain is still ticking around, thinking about his day, thinking about Alfred, thinking about his girlfriends, and it's really interesting to spend a whole issue in Bruce's head. And I'm assuming it's Bruce because, the Batman Confidentials are usually sort of out of continuity kind of stuff. On the cover, it looks like it might be Dick Grayson, but once you get into the issue, I think just watching and reading all the dialogue in his head and watching him go through all these detective skills, it's pretty obvious that it's Bruce. But it's a really interesting read, and if people don't usually pick up Batman Confidential, it's a pretty good issue. You can just pick it up and get a really good story out of it. And there's one other book that I wanted to mention. I already mentioned on the boards, Action Comics 893. I'm really loving all this Lex Luthor stuff. I've just been watching Smallville with my girlfriend, and I've been finding that my favorite part of the program is actually Lex Luthor at the moment. He seems to be like the most interesting character, and I haven't picked up Action Comics before on any kind of ongoing basis, but now that the story's all about Lex Luthor, it's actually it's roped me in. I'm reading every issue and actually looking forward to them, which is crazy for me because I don't really read any Superman books. But yeah, I've been really liking it, and I have to say I recommend this to Jim if you haven't read it already because it's got your favorite storybook element in it, guerrilla warfare. Anyway, that's me. I'll see you guys later.
One of the things I like about Batman Confidential, and I've enjoyed reading about it, is that every story arc changes. It a lot of times will change the number of issues. I agree with you that I love the done-in-ones. I actually liked that about Dini's initial run on Detective Comics, that he would occasionally do the done-in-ones, or that was actually most of the run was done-in-ones, but there was like this interconnected arc to it. But that was something I really liked about the story. The cover, I totally agree with you. It looks like the Dick Grayson Batman on the cover, but when you get inside the book, it's definitely Bruce. I'm 100% with you. It's definitely Bruce. I didn't have an issue. I actually thought the cover was pretty sharp, but I took it completely that it's out of continuity and we're just kind of an enjoyable Batman story. And you're right. It got to detective roots. It was a good, gritty story, and it's something for people. If you're looking for a good Batman tale and you don't want to get caught up in everything that's going on right now, you just want to enjoy Batman. Issue 49 is definitely a highest recommendation for a read. I'm glad to see you the love for the Action Comics. I hope you liked the backup feature, too, because I'm really enjoying Jimmy Olsen. Action Comics right now has been a pretty fun book. I'm glad to hear that with the fact that they're going back to $2.99 for these books, that they're not just leaving the co-features in limbo. They're going to finish those, and they're going to do in one-shots and things like that until they've finish the storylines as they intended. So I'm glad to hear that they're not leaving us hanging, because I'm not a fan of that. If you're deciding to change something because it's not working, that's cool, but give us some finality. Let those of us that really were enjoying it finish it as well, while hooking in new readers with your new price point. I think that's a nice balance, and I love that DC's doing that, because the new people that are picking up on Action Comics, for example, don't have to go back and get that co-feature if they don't want to. But for those of us that have been, we get a chance to finish it. So I really think that that's a nice balance of the two. That Lex Luthor story's been awesome. He was actually, for me, I agree with you, the pivotal point in Smallville. So many of those episodes, he was so cool. Especially when he was skirting that good line, where you saw him as being a good guy and he was really trying to help Clark and he was trying to stay on the straight and narrow. It was just an interesting story to follow. And I think it was a great development of a villain. It showed that there were elements to him that are genuinely likable and charismatic. Michael Rosenbaum just did a bang-up job in that. And you're right that there's something about Action Comics right now that Cornell's capturing, I think, the core qualities that work about Lex Luthor. And I think those are things that are existent in Smallville. I think they're existent in its comics history and things like that. And I'm glad to see actually that it pulled in a person who normally wouldn't be reading Superman. I will be curious, and if you could please call us back. You certainly call back beforehand if you want to continue chatting about Action Comics. That's awesome. But when Cornell starts doing Superman stories, let us know if you like the author enough and what he's doing that you consider trying out the Superman. Because I'm actually really curious about the fact that you haven't previously been a Superman reader of any sorts, and this has kind of brought you into the Superman mythos, at least on some level. Will you continue after Lex Luthor's done? Will you give the next issue a shot, or are you done when Lex is? I'm curious to see what you do. And let us know. There's no right or wrong answer to that. I'm intrigued when somebody is kind of in a different perspective, because I've been reading Superman for so long that I can't really comment from that end. So I think that's very interesting, and thanks for that voicemail.
Be a good boy, finish your homework, and be in bed by 9. And hey, please tell the big man I said hello.
Once again, our sponsors for this episode are DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Remember, you can pick up that Batman 80-page giant, regularly $5.99, 40% off, only $3.59. That really changes that price total on that 80-page book to have it only for $3.59. So definitely check out DCBService.com for that incredible discount. And over at InStockTrades.com, don't forget to check out the DC Comics Encyclopedia. It's in the 75th anniversary of this wonderful company. It's really cool for those of you that love seeing these wonderful resource books. Scott Beatty was involved with this, and M. Teitelbaum, and just various artists are in there. The cover artist is Alex Ross. This is one of the DK Publishing books. Never checked one of these out. It's a wonderful resource that's been revised, expanded, and updated. There is a Vertigo one, too. This DC Comics one is 25% off. It's $40 regularly, only $30, which is a great discount. You save $10 off of that price. Remember, if you're buying from InStockTrades.com, orders of $50 or more give you free shipping. Jim, our next episode, we're going to continue airing our New York Comic-Con footage. We're going to keep airing it until we exhaust it. We had some great discussions with listeners. We had some great discussions from independent creators. We just had some wonderful opportunities there at the New York Comic-Con. And for anybody we didn't get to record with at New York Comic-Con, I apologize. I really just had a great time meeting and chatting with everybody. The con for me, from creators to fellow podcasters to authors to everyone we met, it was just a wonderful experience, and I just thought everybody was pleasant. I mean, it was New York Comic Con for me with the amount of people that were there. You would think that people had a reason to be ornery, and I never got that vibe. It was just a wonderful group of people to be with the entire time, and I've just got to shout that out at the con. I don't know. Assuming your experience was the same.
Woohoo! Had a ball, man. It was a fun time. It was an amazing time. It was a very exhausting time.
It was.
But it was so worth it, and I'm already starting to think about next year, planning and the game plan, the battle plan for next year's New York Comic Con.
Thank you so much for everyone who stopped by, though, and all the kind words about the podcast. It was really something. This show is a lot of work every week to put in. I'm not saying that to pull out a violin. It's just the opposite. I think when you have such nice people who come up and say such nice things to us, and it just meant a lot. And it was something that from the con, it re-energizes you a lot of times. Because we both work full-time jobs. Plus you try to keep up with all the comics that you're reading and enjoying. And I have other hobbies and I'm married and stuff like that. It's when you have somebody who comes up and says just a kind word because they found some value. Even if you don't listen to the show every single episode. You pick and choose and listen to segments here and there, which is fine. I appreciate any time you've given us. That was something that I just really appreciated at the con, and I just want to say thank you to our listening audience, fellow podcasters for kind words, creators who were so wonderful to us there. It just really keeps the show going, and it is appreciated. We will see everyone, Jim, next week.
Bye!
Flying through space and time, 1,000 different lifetimes. Faded for love and flaws and incredibly clear sightlines. Swinging your mace around, such a practical outlook. Helping the JSA and occasionally supporting your own book. Hawkman, Hawkman, eagle eyes can't see. Hawkman, your plan and what you do to me. Villains are closing in, be they Thanin Guard or Egyptian. Working so hard to thwart you and Hawkgirl's mission. The odds are not on your side, and danger seems to stack up. Things would be so much easier if you would just call